want to call to order the August 27 Board of Education meeting, Hastings-on-Hudson Union Free School District. I want to welcome Charlie Wilson for his first official public meeting. You've been here already and have said some words, and we'll look forward to hearing more from you tonight. So with that, first of all, Janine, have I said everything I need to say to start the meeting?
Yes.
Okay, good. Great. So I'm going to pass it over immediately to Charlie for a report from the superintendent.
Yes, thank you very much. I have to say that I conclude my first month of working here as an interim superintendent in Hastings. Very impressed with Hastings, and very grateful at the kindness and welcoming spirit of the community, and many of you who are here tonight and others who really have made it a pleasant transition for me. So I thank the board also for giving me the opportunity to serve here. At every turn, I encounter something that's really great about Hastings and to be proud of. Most recently, I found out that this past year, most recent advanced placement exams, for example, 298.99 members of our student body scored 3 or higher on that exam, which puts them into an honors class. I've been impressed by the many successful projects and facilities improvements that have taken place this year, and we look forward to, I know the board is going to go on a tour, a building tour this Wednesday. I think it's in the afternoon, 3 o'clock or 3:30 or something, that's all.
3:40.
And so we look forward to that, but I personally had the opportunity to see the projects in advance, and they are very, very impressive improvements throughout the district. I was very happy to see the board having a productive planning session as they did earlier this month in the beginning of August, and in that they developed different committee assignments and different topics that they wanted to cover in their meetings coming up this year, and a set of objectives, which I think that they, part of tonight is to formally adopt, or at least to discuss those plans that they made. A very, very impressive set of goals that they have. A number of new board members this year are in combination with some veteran board members, and it makes for a nice diversity, and some very brand new to serving in public function like this, and I think that there's a lot of energy that will be generated, and a lot of positiveness that will come from that. I've also been impressed by the work of the Facilities Committee, a committee that's been at work for over a year. I've only been able to attend a couple of their meetings. Since this year even, they've started to meet and plan, and tonight they will be featured speakers, presenters to the capital project proposals that are being considered, and I think you're going to find that to be very, very interesting, and another way to help improve the quality of education here in Hastings. I have been working with special education. We know that last year that there was the report made, and that the commitment was made to improve the quality of special education. And as a result of that, I personally have been working with the leadership of special ed, developing plans for staff development and a variety of other, working with the general education faculty to improve the quality of integrated instruction for our special needs students. We've also been working with BOCES in bringing in some new technology for that same population. The use of technology being such an important learning tool these days for all students. Last Wednesday, I shared a conference with Dr. Katzman, who, as you may know, she led the evaluation of the special ed system a year ago, and she is due to come back later this fall. She is going to be coming back here first to meet with parents and staff and others to determine how much progress has been made in what she had recommended, and then with that we'll come back again and make a presentation to the board. I've also recommended to the board that we spend the meeting on September 17th with the major topic which might be in addition to continuing discussion of the proposals from the committee that's going to present tonight. I think that we might also then spend some time, as we should from time to time, continuing to follow the progress being made with special ed that we report at the 17th of September meeting. Following Ms. Kasman's visit, she will be continuing to work with the district, and we have many other plans that we think will help to improve special ed, quality special ed program. This coming Thursday, I should also point out that there will be sharing of the IEPs to make sure that the general education teachers know what is the modifications that need to be made to meet the needs of the special ed students. I am personally looking forward to working with SEPTA as its district. I'm district liaison. I've had some very good meetings with the parents of SEPTA. This will be about the third or fourth SEPTA in my career that I've belonged to. I look forward to working here with the group as a liaison. I have also been very impressed with the faculty and staff in general. At a planning retreat today at BOCES, we came up with many ambitious academic goals for the staff and in general for this coming year. I want to thank you for letting me share my impressions of what's going on here at Hastings. I also have some suggestions for the future I'd like to share. While I've given the privilege of making these reports, and gosh knows I have no problem doing that because there's always plenty of material, and would be happy to continue in this role, I have mentioned to the board president for your consideration. As it happens, the other districts that I've been in do not confine the role of reporting to the board and the public to just the superintendent. In fact, the common practice that I've observed is that there's a round table so that each of the board members is also called on to make reports. Typically, if they are members of committees or liaisons to groups, they're expected to report at every meeting in terms of what has gone on in their most recent meeting. And two, they like to comment, usually people like to comment on other things too that they think is to the general interest about the school system. And this, by the way, usually includes, as it should, the student reps to report on student life. This is, to me, a good way to do it that I've seen in most other schools that I've worked in, and just makes common sense that you might want to consider this practice for the future. So, but still, I will present, if I continue to be asked, with my own report, if I may. So do consider sharing this, and the inclusion also should include our business official. So do not off the hook. Other things of note, I have, after some uncertainty in the matter, am very pleased to announce that it now appears that there is a football team, boys football team, for this fall. Good. You may or may not know, but I think it's related to the issue of concussions that we all know about, that high school participation in boys football has been dropping off throughout the region and even the country. That said, there are still students and still people that support the game of football. It's another discussion, but I personally, I know from experience there's some boys that really need football, and if you talk to parents of those kids, you'll get that side of the story. Yeah. And I know these kids really want to play football. They only have a squad right now of 17, but they're out recruiting more, and with any luck at all, they should be able to put the team together this year. Please note that the change in tonight's schedule, we had, going back to special ed, we had planned at one point that we would do some reporting on special ed tonight, but the agenda is just too huge, and we don't want to give it short shrift, and that's why we've moved that into the September time slot. The Board of Ed has also been asking me questions with respect to what is the school district doing about, and if I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, juuling. Is that the term? And that's something that I've also received some emails. I know there's a lot of, and rightly so, a lot of angst about this. We as a district are working on this, and we'll continue to work on it. We have contacted the Student Assistance Program of Westchester County, which I will tell you from other experience is an excellent resource, community resource, and can give us a lot of help in dealing with these issues. And in addition to that, the high school has already made plans for a program and student awareness, parent awareness come in September, and they are planning to do that. The district will follow up with a report on these and other activities to the board. We'll monitor it. We will also be concerned, although the newest thing that we mentioned, Julian, is getting a lot of press and attention. Frankly, I got to tell you, from what I know, unless it's changed all of a sudden, the drug of choice amongst teenagers in Westchester County is alcohol, and I don't know that that's changed. But I'll tell you this, all of these issues, marijuana now, a new situation legally, is something else that we can worry about. And the list goes on. So I think that substance abuse in general has to be considered, and we have to make sure our kids have correct information, that parents are involved, and that we do everything we can. I agree entirely. Consideration is being given with respect to whether there should also be a change in the athletic policy that permits students on occasion what's happened in the past, and I think current policy does say that if students are involved in substance abuse, that they're removed from a team from a period of time. It came up in today's meeting that may be a bit, the current policy may be a little bit out of date. So maybe the board and maybe the athletic program needs to look at that. So these are just some of the things that we're doing, and we would appreciate if people have other ideas, the things we can do that we're not doing, please let us know. Those are, and just one more thing I'll mention that's kind of a good thing, you know, and this happened before I got here, so thank you very much, because the district was able to close on 3 contracts, all its bargaining units. And boy, that's so much better than if you were still negotiating 3 contracts. So that will enable us, I think, to focus on doing a lot of other things than just having to negotiate. But that's good. I know that the people that work here are very, very happy with that as well. So that will conclude my presentation.
Okay. Do you want to introduce the new teachers? Or do you want me to?
Oh yeah. Well, I would like to. You know what I'd like to do? We're not sure how many. I know there are some new teachers here because we just hired them. It's good to see you. It's good to see you all. But we didn't sort of organize this, so I'm just, you know, I'm going to ask you to do, if you don't mind, if you're a new hire, if you could just stand up, and we'll start right here in the front row, and then as we do that, and then just go to the back, and then each person in each row, it's your turn. If you could introduce yourself by name and indicate your new position here. And we want to give you all a big round of applause and congratulations. So
no, just in their seats. I think just in their seats.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Bellis. I'm new school counselor at Farragut Middle School.
Hi, I'm Dana Finsmith, and I'm a new special education teacher at Hillside Elementary School. Hi, I'm Julianne Snyder. I am a full-time school counselor at Hillside.
I'm Rochelle Whitlock. I'm going to be a reading specialist in Farragut Middle School and Point Two in High School.
Hi, my name is Carmel Tedeschi. I'm a new special education teacher at Hillside Elementary School.
Okay, I'm sorry. Please.
Hi, I'm Brittany Scoltetti. I'm a new special education teacher at Farragut Middle School.
I'm Davina Cruz. I'm going to be the new social studies teacher at Farragut Middle School.
James Forcenito, school psychologist at Hillside.
And my name is Nicole Siegel. I'm a school psychologist district-wide.
And we also have a veteran staff member, but who is in a new position.
Jeanette Coker, hello everyone. Thank you very much. I'm sorry.
You are now the district director
Yes.
of guidance.
Yes.
And what you need to think about, how many of these folks got up and you've heard, psychologists, you've heard special needs teachers, reading teachers, changes in guidance, and more than one guidance hire and so on. So this is a reflection of what the board has tried to do with its emphasis on mental and emotional health and helping students to grow and develop and in those ways deal with issues like stress and so on and so forth. So these are, you see this being reflected in the positions that we've hired this year, according to what is the plan, what are the values that are being expressed in this year's budget.
Great.
So welcome all, thank you. And we look forward to seeing all you new ones that tomorrow we have a tour and all of that. I hope you know about that.
We'd like to take a quick break and just have the board welcome them individually. And if they want some dessert, they can have some dessert.
Okay.
Continue with the meeting.
How do they do that? They just
We just stand up and mill around for a moment.
Yeah, so it'll take 5 minutes to do that, yeah.
Where's the food? Where is it?
That wasn't an invitation.
If anyone wants some dessert, there's fruit and cookies over there. Help yourselves.
Okay, oh, Patrick, we lost Patrick. Hold on one second.
Jody back.
Okay, now we've got Patrick. Patrick, are we rolling? Yeah, okay. So just call the meeting back to order. We have a lot to get through tonight, so I want to keep moving. I believe, so we've got the architect's report now. That makes sense, right? Okay. Okay, so I'm going to invite up Veronica, and I don't have your last name, Burns. Okay, Veronica Burns from H2M Architects to present some thoughts on the potential upcoming bond project.
So thank you very much. My name is Veronica Burns. I'm a senior architect with H2M and vice president. And I've been working with the district since about 2014 and worked with the last bond. And now we've been working to develop this current bond. If you could advance to the next slide. So back into every 5 years, the school district is required to complete a building condition survey or 5-year plan and report back to the SED on that. So back in 2015, we did that, and we identified, it's a survey of the existing buildings and the condition and recommendations, and it helps with the district in budgeting for future projects. So we did that back in 2015, and the district has slowly been chipping away with the different work items on that list through their regular operating budget. But there's an extensive list that they've been trying to tackle, and there are many items on it, so they finally decided that they may consider moving forward with a capital project. So over the past year, we've been working with the board, the facilities committee, and the district staff and administration in developing a scope of work for the project. And so essentially there's a couple of different things with the building condition survey. There's health and safety items and infrastructure items, and the health and safety items are the ones that take the highest priority. So those are the things that are really in the base scope of work that we're looking at tonight. So next slide, please. So the proposed work is developed, it's in 3 separate options. Option 1 is really the must-haves that the district really needs within their existing facilities, and then option 2 are some projects at the middle school and high school campus, and then option 3 is a project at Hillside Elementary School. So as I mentioned, on the building condition survey, there's over 100 items that we can possibly comment on, and we've narrowed it down to these 10 or so items that are really the most critical and the ones that the entire committee recommends moving forward with. So one of the most important things as an architect or an engineer that we look at is making sure that your buildings are watertight. So we look at the exterior masonry and the roofs. So the first item, exterior walls and chimney repairs, over years, the mortar deteriorates and the bricks crack, and then water potentially can get in, causing either interior damage or mold or whatever. So we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So we've budgeted $507,500 for exterior wall and chimney repairs. And I just want to note that if there's a little asterisk next to the number, that just means it's a hard cost only, and hard costs are the actual construction costs paid to the contractor. That total at the bottom, the total health, safety, and infrastructure items, includes soft costs. So the soft costs are other things like bonds, insurance, contingencies, architect and engineers fees, attorneys fees, printing, different testing that needs to take place. So when you're looking at all those numbers, the smaller numbers, they don't actually, you won't be able to add them up to see a total, because it was getting complicated with all the numbers. So the next item is the roof replacement and parapet repairs. So back in the 2014 bond, we replaced the middle school auditorium roof as well as the gymnasium roof. And the $1,650,000 would replace the remainder of the roofs on this building, as well as some of the parapets that are in poor condition. And the parapets are the walls from the wall that extend above the roof elevation. The next item, resilient tile and sheet flooring repair. So that's vinyl asbestos tile, or VAT, and we budgeted $200,000 to continue to remove that from the older areas and replace with a new floor tile. The next item is another $200,000 budget for interior doors and hardware, and this is a great example of the old and the new doors. So that door has the new handicap accessible hardware on it and a new door, and the door over on the right is an older door that does not have handicap accessible hardware on it. So it was perfect setting for this, and so that's what we're looking to replace the hardware, so it's all handicap accessible, as well as the doors that are in poor condition.
Veronica, sure. We're not talking about the security doors, right? The very expensive.
No, nope. This is just a standard door and hardware replacement. Yep. The next item is there are several elevators in the building, but the one that is in the worst condition is the loading dock elevator. So we've budgeted $400,000 for the replacement of that elevator. And the item after that is plumbing fixtures, and that would be to renovate some of the existing toilet rooms to bring them up to handicap accessibility codes, as well as more energy efficient fixtures and lighting. The next item is the communication system. So to replace the PA system in the middle school and the high school, they don't necessarily talk to each other properly, and there's some spaces that don't have appropriate notifications. So this is a budget of $650,000 in order to replace that system in the two buildings combined. The next item is replacing the 1988 boilers. So although your boilers are in good condition now, we could not recommend replacing them because they are more than 25 years old, and ASHRAE states that after 25 years you should budget for replacement of boilers. So we've budgeted $800,000 for that. The next item is the music suite renovation. This is the existing music rooms are in really poor condition. The floor is delaminating, and they do need a lot of work. So this is $550,000 budgeted to renovate the entire music suite, which is 2 classrooms and 2 small storage rooms in the front. And that's potentially that space could be reconfigured in order to maybe make bigger spaces or come up with a better storage area to provide more space for the students. Let me advance to the next slide. So these are just some photographs demonstrating some of the existing conditions, some of the items that are in poor condition: the door hardware, the cornice around the perimeter of the building, the brick that's cracked and the mortar that's deteriorating, the roofs that are in poor condition, and the clock system that does not work. So those are the option 1 or the must-have items for the middle school, high school building. The next slide is items at Hillside Elementary that all fall into that must-have or the option 1 category. So again, a smaller building and a little bit newer building, or a lot newer building. So we've only budgeted $75,000 for that pointing and masonry repairs at Hillside Elementary School. There's also some sidewalks that are in poor condition, either that they've settled and they're a tripping hazard, or additional sidewalks that need to be provided around the building. So we've budgeted $151,000 for that. And again, back in 2014, we replaced one of the roof areas, actually 2 of the roof areas at Hillside, and the $900,000 budgeted here would be for additional roof replacements at Hillside Elementary School. There's also some windows in the building that are in poor condition. At the office, the main office, the nurse's office, and the west wing and the basement. So we'd recommend replacing them with new 1-inch insulated windows, glazing. They'd be more energy efficient as well as operable. Right now, some of the windows don't function properly. And again, we've budgeted $242,000 for the replacement of the vinyl asbestos tile in Hillside Elementary School. $150,000 for electrical service and distribution, so that's replacing the remaining panel boards that were not replaced in the 2014 bond, and repairs to the PA system for $125,000. And the last three items are replacing the exhaust units that are not functioning properly and the air handler unit that doesn't function properly in the gym for $300,000. New parking lot and repave existing. So I'm sure everyone is aware that at Hillside parking is a shortage, and there are many teachers that don't have assigned spaces and are parking out on the street. This is a safety concern, and so what we've developed is a plan to extend the parking lot and add about 20 to 25 spaces on the parking lot, as well as repave the existing lot for $317,000. So the total cost of all the items at Hillside Elementary is essentially $3.8 million. And these are just some photographs demonstrating the existing windows, the vinyl asbestos tile, and the roof that's in poor condition at Hillside Elementary. So the total for option one, which again they are the must-have items that the district, the administration, the facilities committee has developed, is $10,899,440, and that's a total of hard and soft costs for these work items. About $7 million at the middle school, high school, about $3.8 million at Hillside Elementary. And then actually just to add, the estimated tax rate increase on a bond of $10 million, which would be 1.3%, and I believe, Maureen, you said at a tax rate of $25,000, it would be a $200 increase. Yeah. So now when we get to the second option, so option two would potentially include all the items in option one as well as the items in option two. So option two is to renovate the boys and girls locker room on the high school, where the high school gym is. They are in although some work was done this summer, there are other portions of it is in poor condition, and there's a disparity between the boys and the girls' locker rooms. The girls' locker room is much smaller than the boys. It doesn't provide for the same facilities, so you don't meet the Title IX requirements for the locker rooms. And we would also be adding new bathrooms in that area as well as a health classroom. The second item is to repurpose the middle school. I fixed it in one place. I forgot it in the other place. Repurpose the middle school auditorium. So right now it's an unused space up at the upper level above the library, and I believe the stage is used on occasion, or used for some chorus class or an acting class. But you're not using the auditorium because it's in such poor condition. The plaster is delaminating off the wall. One of the things that the committee has talked about is renovating that space and repurposing it so it's no longer an auditorium. And it potentially could be a STEAM space. That we've proposed a TV studio up there, but essentially you could get 4 additional classrooms, and we do have a floor plan for that kind of demonstrates some flexibility and some options that you have there. That's budgeted about $2.6 million for that renovation. The reason why that number is so high is that those plaster walls contain asbestos, so we're budgeting for the asbestos removal as part of that project. And then the last item, as a result of potentially renovating the middle school auditorium, there are other places within the existing school that you could gain some space and repurpose some space. So we're proposing renovating the Technology Room 124 and Science Lab 261, because those spaces, as they're currently functioning, would move into the new middle school auditorium space. So the total cost of those items are $5.9 million. And this is just a floor plan of the locker rooms, but we're going to do some work on that because I know Joe was working hard this summer and took care of some of this work already. And the next slide is the middle school auditorium. So all the way on the left is actually where the stage is now, and we would propose actually removing the stage and making 4 large classroom spaces with a corridor that connects the 2 ends together. And those squiggly lines are just meant to be like a folding partition or some sort of a movable wall so that you could open it up to a much larger space if you wanted that. And it'll be important to define the program for that. But it's exciting to have this huge space and to be able to take advantage of it and bring more educational opportunities to the students. So the total for option 2 includes all the items in option 1 at the middle school, high school, as well as all the items in option 1 for Hillside Elementary School, as well as all of the options at the middle school for those additional projects, for a total of $16,878,053. And again, that includes hard and soft construction costs. And that tax rate would be about 2.15%, or about $400 on a $25,000 tax. If your total tax bill is $25,000, yep. So the next option...
Could I ask you one question?
Yeah, of course.
About the option to the middle school auditorium repurposing.
Sure.
Does it include the cost of replacing the elevator or fixing the elevator, or that's...
No, the only elevator that's budgeted for in this project is the freight elevator. Yep. That one. We when we surveyed all the elevators, that was the one that was in the one that we're budgeting for is the one that's in the worst condition.
There is an elevator that goes...
Oh, yes.
We
Yeah.
just don't, it's not,
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So the third option is an option at Hillside Elementary School. So one of the things that's been discussed by the committee is that you're short on space there, and you don't have a functioning cafeteria. So one of the things that we've looked at is potentially adding a building addition to essentially the east side of the building, essentially behind the playground or behind the fields. It would be a 2-story addition in the back where the classrooms are. So you'd get 2 classrooms on the upper level, on the first floor, and then 2 classrooms on the lower level, directly below that. Then you'd get a large cafeteria where you could house all your students, as well as a full-service kitchen, and also a stage. And the thing that's really nice about this is that, of course, it gives you additional space within the building, but if you're able to add this building addition on, there's other spaces within the building that can be repurposed. So the existing cafeteria or multi-purpose room could become a library. The existing library would become a music suite, and another space that would become a STEAM space. So you'd get, and that would all those renovations would be part of your existing operating budget, so that those renovations are not included within the actual bond. The only thing that would potentially be in the bond is the actual building addition. So the building addition is $8,185,000 as it's budgeted for right now. Yep.
Oh, I know we've been talking about, some people have voiced concern that they would like a full kitchen, functioning cafeteria. Question for you: if we don't do an addition, could the current cafe have a kitchen added to it, or retrofitted with a kitchen to create a cooking?
We actually have looked at that. It would be, remember there was that area that I think is like Lenny's Garden. There's an area that's in
that outdoor.
Right, but I know. Were you involved with that? We had looked at it a couple of years back.
I think there's an opportunity to carve out a small space for a little bit larger kitchen. My concern would be you're already tight on space there, and then you're going to take more space away from the students potentially to put a bigger kitchen in there.
So one of my hesitations a little bit is what's our enrollment going to look like as we are moving forward? Because, so say, for example, when I came here, my son's class had 145 kids in it, but now our Ks and our 1s and 2s are smaller, as we tend to have more double-income families moving in, unlike my generation. So I look at where I grew up, there's a big behemoth junior high that was built because of a population explosion that then died. So I'm not saying yes or no, but I understand there's some space concerns right now. I'm just not sure what our enrollment's going to look like as we go down the line.
So I think that's one of the things that the district is considering, is doing some sort of an enrollment study. And I think it really comes down to the class sizes that you want to have and what the district is used to, or what they want for the future. Not for me to decide.
The other thing I maybe haven't put out there, but would there be a possibility, we were looking at it initially for class, a room space.
Sure.
We had to put one of our specialists here on a part, and that may not continue, but as of right now, we have no additional classrooms if we need additional at Hillside. Could we just do an extension, obviously without the cafeteria, and then should we have that just to, have a sense? I think when we looked at it, the cafeteria came as an afterthought, adding a few classrooms, because once you kind of engage in that type of larger construction project, it was like, how far out do you want to take advantage of doing it, not just add like
4 classrooms or,
We could just do something that would just add classroom space as well. That's an option.
Sure, oh, it absolutely is, yeah. And I would.
When we looked at it and put this cafeteria option in it, but we can also, I would just be curious to see that number on.
Yeah, we can certainly provide numbers for what just a 4 or say 6 classroom addition would be. What's interesting about this is that holistically solves other potential issues within the building and gives you additional space. The library, you get a STEAM space within the elementary school, as well as the larger music area.
Spaces aren't great. I think that's the other issue. There's no longer even a conference room available. I mean, not that those are only reasons, but we'll do a much more comprehensive meeting to talk about Hillside as it relates to this. But maybe that's good to look at that as an option also.
And this was part of part of this was really developed by, I believe it was the building principal. When we met that day, when we were meeting with all the administrators, they had thought about this might be a plan that might work for them. So
a lot of the administrators just expressed things that they've heard, and then when we didn't know, we were looking at the space, and then part of looking at the space when you're doing a large-scale construction project, that was also, would that be an opportunity to take other cafeterias?
Yeah, of course.
Well, and also that provides you another space. Beyond the purpose room. And this could be air conditioned right now, like the all-purpose room,
another cooling center.
Central air and things like that as well.
Yeah, of course. And the budget the budget does include providing air conditioning in the space. So next slide. So option 3 potentially includes all the must-have items from option 1, the items from the middle school, high school, option 2, as well as the building addition at option 3, for a total cost of $25,693,000, and that's about a 3.3% increase in taxes based on a total tax bill of $25,000. So about $600 per year. So now to talk about schedule. So as I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, we've been working with the district a few years in developing the 5-year plan and chipping away with at the different work items. And really over the last years when we've been focusing on this scope of work and really trying to define it and hone in and narrow down on the must-have items. And the list was considerably larger earlier on. So that's really the first item that we're at. We started back in November 2017, and now we're in September almost of 2018, and we're developing that final scope of work. So if the board was to choose to move forward with this, then the things that would happen in September are the items noted above. So essentially, you'd finalize the scope of work, you'd contact bond counsel, so they could start working on the developing the bond. The SECRA resolutions would need to start, and SECRA is the State Environmental Quality Review Act, and essentially there's 2 paths for SECRA. One is type 1 and one is type 2. A type 2 action is basically more like building renovation type work. A type 1 action is more extensive, so if it includes building additions or the site work at Hillside, you may end up being a type 1 action. And the thing that's critical about this is because the SECRA has to be completed and you need to declare yourselves the lead agency before the board could decide to move forward with a resolution for a bond vote. So that's something that I would recommend, really just finalizing the scope of work in the month of September. So by October 1st you have a definitive scope, and then you could start the SECRA process. Again, if it was a type 2, it'll be very quick. If it's type 1, it could take about 3 months. Once that 3-month period is over and the SECRA is complete, there's a 30-day wait period that has to take place, so any agencies having jurisdiction can comment on the scope, and then at that point you would declare yourselves the lead agency, and then you could then move forward with decide to move forward with the bond. oftentimes what districts do is they move forward with the more restrictive or the bigger scope of work for SECRA in order to get it started, and then you could always remove items, but you can't add items. So that's always, it's important to make sure you're including everything that you may want to include in a final bond. So this brings us up to about January 1st, 2019, where the board, whatever the first board meeting is in January, you would vote to move forward with the capital project. The district clerk would publish the notice of the bond referendum in your local official newspaper, and that time frame is 45 to 49 days before an actual bond vote. So I note February 15th as a bond vote. We realize that that is not an ideal day for an actual vote. It's probably like during the winter break or whatever, but that would be the earliest that you could do it if you had a board meeting on January 1st in terms of the 45 to 49 day time period. You may want to consider end of February or March or something like that for a potential bond vote. And the reason why that is critical, because it takes such a long time to get through the state education department with building permits, and so the next slide talks a little bit more about that. So once the bond passes, we start the construction documents, and the construction documents will take somewhere between 6 and 9 months to complete, depending on the actual scope of work that you may choose. So we submit them to the state education department, because that's where you receive your building permits from the state education department. And the typical review through state ed is about 40 weeks. However, they have a new process called third-party review, and with a third-party review, it does cut the time down to right now to about 3 months. There is an additional cost associated with it, but that potentially puts you in an earlier construction season. So although you have the cost of the third-party review, you potentially save money because construction costs only continue to go up. So I would estimate at this point, if you had a bond vote in February, March of 2019, that by the early 2020, say January 2020, you have a building permit, and you go out to bid. The bid process is usually about 4 to 6 weeks. Interview contractors, make awards, and by, say, March 1st or March 15th, you would be awarding the contracts for construction. March 2020, that is. You'd be awarding the contracts for construction, and construction would start. And what that actually means is that the contractors are signing their contracts. They are starting to get all their paperwork in place. They're starting to order their long lead time items, so that really when, and maybe if you do choose to do a building addition, then they really would start to break ground and fence off the area. You wouldn't really see any substantial construction start until after school is over at the end of June 2020. And at that point, we'd also be doing any asbestos abatement or anything like that. We would do that after the kids are out of the buildings.
I just want to ask about the 6 to 9 months.
Sure.
That one project will be submitted after 6 months and the second after. How are you divvying up the one project versus 2 projects? Is it like
just
hillside versus?
No, it really depends on what your scope of work is. It really depends on what you decide. I just know that it depending on what work the board may decide to do. It typically takes, I would say, about 9 months to do. If it was a building addition at Hillside, that would take about 9 months to do the entire set of construction documents. So on the smaller end of the scale, if you only choose to do building renovation work, it'll take about 6 months. But as we get into a bigger scope, which may include the auditorium renovation, repurposing here, or the addition or the site work at Hillside, that gets more into a 9-month time period. So,
can you talk to the fact that if we wait for the vote after March, that we actually, you mentioned, miss a whole year?
Yeah. So essentially, what we did is we backed into knowing that. We knew that starting construction in the summer of 2019 was just not realistic based on the time frame, but based on when you can have your vote and based on the time frame to get through SED. So we figured best case scenario is that you could have, start construction in the summer of 2020 or March 2020. So moving backwards from there with the amount of time it takes to prepare construction documents and the amount of time it takes to get through the state education department, it really backed us into that date of the February, March 2019 in order to have the bond vote. So the longer you push that out, you miss the construction schedule.
Happens in the summer?
Yes. It doesn't all happen in the summer, but a majority of it would have to happen in the summer. And a bond of this nature, whether it be 10 million or 16 million or 28 million, whatever the last number was, it would, that would be a project that would be spread out over several summers, depending on what the final scope of work is. But we don't want to lose a summer, that's why. Yeah.
Right, because you're talking about, even if it were to be able to start, then depending on what we did,
yeah,
it would probably not be completed potentially, at least to 21, if not 22. I mean, the last took us a few years to get through.
Yeah, easily I would think it would be the summer of 2021. Yeah, probably the summer of 22 you'd be finalizing the scope. The building addition, if it was a building addition in Hillside, that could happen throughout the school year, because it would be fenced off and completely segregated from the remainder of the building. You potentially could, do the auditorium renovation if the abatement took place over the summer. That could happen throughout the school year as well, maybe second shift. But a lot of this work, flooring replacements or boilers, for instance, that can't happen during the school year. It has to happen during the summer. So it has to be phased where, as an example, boilers need to be ordered so they're on site, July 1st, so that they can be installed and that you have heat when the temperature drops below 68 degrees, because you're required to have heat at that point in the classrooms or in the buildings.
Veronica, I just had a question about the secret process. So if we had to start that next month, but we don't know what's going to be in, and there's the option between 1 and 2, I guess what I'm saying is, how do you ever recommend secret 2? You have to go with 1 because you don't know what's going to be in the final.
Yeah, so that we would suggest if the board is contemplating this scope of work, whether it be option 1, 2, or 3, or all of it, move forward with the we would do the secret review and make the determination.
The 1.
Well, it's actually they do the review, and then based on the review.
No, secret 1 or 2. I'm saying you were saying secret. I'm not talking about option 1, 2, or 3.
Yeah, secret 1 or 2.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. So I would suggest, if this is the potential scope that the board is contemplating, then we start the secret process. The planner will determine if it's 1 or 2. But what I need to do, I'm only the architect, I'm not the planner, so the planner will determine if it's 1 or 2, and but I want to make sure that you're protected, and so we're assuming the longer time period, so I just want to assume it's type 1.
So you essentially do an environmental review on everything.
On everything. Then you decide what you're going to do.
Yeah. That's correct.
I'd like to congratulate the architect as well as the committee for putting in so much work.
Thank you.
Over a year now, I believe. And plus the fact that you've presented a very clear, well-considered set of options.
Thank you.
But on the business of the timeline, I think that, for example, we have a lot of people from the community sitting here tonight that probably were not members of the committee and are just hearing all of this. And same thing with members of the board. So when you're suddenly, exposed to a bunch of numbers, price tags, and ideas and different, options and so on, it's a lot to take in the first bite. Still, you pointed out the advantage to a timeline that, if we could stick to it, would have tremendous advantages in terms of being able to get the job done longer term in a short order. So this is a very practical question. I think this would suggest to me that this is not the first meeting that we're going to have, because board members will have questions, and other community members come or hear about it, whatnot, they'll have questions. And so I'm just thinking out loud that maybe we ought to book you for every meeting between now and February or something.
Yep, that would be fine.
It's not that's all we'll do, because we'll stick to, we're going to have our other ideas and speakers and programs that are also going to be discussed, but it could be a double bill where just about every opportunity we're going to have to keep talking until
we can continue
really
to update.
Comfortable and the public really understands what it is, the direction we're headed in.
Absolutely, I'd be happy
to. Along with that, I think it's important that people in the community know that two things that I think are important. One is that we will be having some community meetings as we move along through this to get input, to provide information and to get input. And also that the Facilities Committee is going to be working on information that we'll make public. One thing that we're planning to do is frequently asked questions that will address a lot of the kinds of questions that I think people will have that will come up, and trying to provide as much information out there so that people can be as informed as possible, but then also have community meetings where we can get input from the community.
And
I just want to, I think your point is great. I think having you here to help answer would be wonderful. And I think the point that I also think we need to make at every meeting is that financially we have a good deal with the state, that for every dollar we borrow, it costs us in the end about 58 cents-ish on the dollar. So it's a way to save taxes for us, because rather than our regular operating budget, which is dollar for dollar, this is, we're only paying, say, 60%-ish, and that's a way to save us money. And we see these big price tags, but that's not what it costs us in the end, and that's, to me, critical to passing this bond.
It's funny, that was the notes I had put down just to keep in mind as we go forward, that we do receive, even at the $25 million, the state is picking up almost 43% of that total. And like Dr. Wilson and I were discussing, we, as a district, receive one of the highest aid ratios in Westchester County. Very unusually high aid ratio. The other thing also to keep in mind as we contemplate even doing maybe more work than we initially had discussed, is right now the borrowing rates are at a historical all-time low. Years ago when we were borrowing, I'm not telling anybody anything you don't know about borrowing rates, but especially for us, the last bond we borrowed it at 2%. Years ago, that could change very quickly. And you really want to lock in a low borrowing rate. A lot of districts who were thinking about putting off some work for a few years are now actually upfronting work. There's a tremendous push to get work done while the borrowing is much lower. I can tell you that years ago, I had one set of bonds that were callable. Most of the time when we borrow money, they don't want them to be callable bonds. So and we also, the state is only reimbursing us based upon a 2% interest rate. So they're kind of incentivizing districts to borrow now, because if we borrow a bond at a higher rate, they'll only pay that 42.4% back, 2% amortization of the bond. So that's something we should think about. Part also is that price escalation continues to happen every year in the construction of about 4 to 5% as you put things off. Right now we have the lowest debt, I believe, as of the last time I looked at it, in all of Westchester County as a school district. I think that's a good thing, although to Lisa's point, this is not unusual. We have not done a lot of bond work because of the recession. We had put off doing a few bonds, so although it feels like we just did one, we hadn't done one for almost 15 years prior to that. So a lot of these items are, we have a great maintenance staff, so we've been able to maintain our buildings, but we cannot continue to put off items. And the other item that we have to think about is a bond is outside of the tax cap. When right now in the operations and maintenance budget, we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year just to maintain and do little jobs around here. That has to come out of our tax cap calculation. When you borrow money, it's an addition. So right now, as we're preparing it, our buildings and maintenance costs are in competition with our program costs. So when you remove that and do a bond, that can help lower our operating costs by probably the tune of $200,000 to $300,000 a year. So as we talk about the increase to taxes, we should also have a decrease in some of our building maintenance costs. So as far as when we get into money, so we do have to, just remind ourselves of these things.
Maureen, I think those are the kinds of things that we're going to have to be explaining, and I think you deserve an enormous amount of credit for the position that we're in now in terms of our debt compared to where we are with respect to other districts. And I think one of the things that the money numbers, well, for some people, it either seems like a lot of money or it gets very confusing. And I think one of the things that we'll attempt to do is to make it very real in terms of what it means, what each thing is going to mean in terms of actual tax cost per, family, per, taxpayer household, and make some of those numbers very concrete and real for people, so we really know what. Because that is the bottom line, and people want to know what the bottom line is if they're going to be voting on option A, B, or C, or Q,
So there's something else to consider, and that is that while there are some of these choices, options, that are really options if you'd like to do them. Some of them you'd like to do, some of them you should do, some of them you really must do. And there's enough of that must do that if you don't do it now, you're going to be doing it in a couple more years because it's going to just start to break down if it hasn't already. So there's enough there to do a substantial bond. Then plus if you, while you're at it, take advantage of some of these financial advantages that have been mentioned and so forth, bundle it into a way that you could accomplish even more.
Sure. And right now, you talk about escalation, right now there's 8% budgeted for escalation in these numbers, so it's 4% per year, and we're budgeting for 2 years, so.
And anytime, I mean, not to be plugging it, but anytime the larger the scope of work, sometimes you get economies of scale in contracts.
Sure. And better quality contractors.
Better quality contractors, and also there's a lot of inherent costs in doing a bond, like bond counsel. There's a lot of, we have to do a full financial report to go out to the bonding agency. So there's definitely things with the, like regardless if you do 20 million or 10 million, those costs are the same. So, I mean, there are reasons that if we're thinking about doing anything, we should really consider anything that we may need to do in the next 5 to 10 years, and certainly, they should be considered as we look forward.
So I know we have a lot on the agenda. Does anyone have any specific questions for Veronica while she's here before she leaves? I know there's other parts of this that we can talk about amongst ourselves. But.
Veronica, in option 1, new parking lot and option 1, Hillside Elementary, the new parking lot and repave existing, 20 to 25 spaces added. What if we kept the existing parking as is and we just did repave? Is there?
Yep, I have that number.
Do you have a bulk? Yeah,
I do, absolutely.
Yeah.
$180,000 budgeted just to repave the existing lot.
Okay, so it's $180,000.
Repair the, it's curbs, repair the deteriorated asphalt restriping.
So repaving and repairs 180.
180, and then another 137 for. Yeah.
Okay.
Hard cost, that is.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, I don't doubt the deterioration of the roofs at Hillside Elementary, but it is a newer building. How old are the roofs that need repair?
I believe that the older roofs are probably from the late 80s or early 90s, probably. I think they're about 30 years old, almost 30 years old.
Okay. Veronica questions. What's the average size of our classrooms in existing Farragut? So we're talking about in the upstairs, the renovated middle school auditorium. They're about 1,000 square foot rooms. These are huge rooms.
Those are big rooms. Those are definitely big.
So what's the average
You've got some,
ELA room? Or
what SED would say is that a classroom should be 770 square feet. You've got some rooms that are in the 600 square foot range, and you've got some bigger rooms that 700 or 800 square feet.
Yep.
But when you get into rooms that are more for either STEAM or the more creative spaces, they take up more space. So we tend to design in the 900 to 1,000 square foot range for those types of spaces.
And currently our maker space in the middle school is double classroom.
That's true.
It's 2,
Yeah.
so it's probably closer to 13.
Yeah.
It's just not a great configured space.
Yeah.
I think that's it for me.
Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you very much.
Very helpful.
Thank you.
And everyone who
Thank you
supported
very
her.
much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Well, perhaps we'll take you up on some format of Charlie's every week, right? Thank you. So, we've got this sort of conversation on the agenda 3 times because we've got capital bond conversation and we've got facilities committee report. I don't know how much different the facilities committee report, if there's a Venn diagram, how much overlap there was with this.
I think
Maybe we just take that right now if you want to.
I think one of the things we need to think about is.
But I don't think there's much different on that facility committee report, right?
So one of the things we need to think about is when we start doing these community forums.
Right.
So maybe we come back to this a little bit.
Okay, so the community forum part is the big difference. Okay.
Can we, I didn't want to ask additional questions because I didn't know if Veronica needed to leave. But I have questions so this is really a Maureen question, I think, more than anything else. Let me ask you this. Do you want to stay on bond scope questions while we're here, even if they're not directly related to Veronica?
I mean, I think we can pull the facilities and bond conversation together at least, so why don't we just do that a little bit later?
Yeah,
Unless
fine,
there's
we can ask
something
questions
specifically you want to
whenever.
ask Veronica.
No, I'll hold it till we get to that point.
Yeah, so why don't we do that? So with that, I'm going to move to item 3, which is public comment. And so if anyone in the public wants to make a comment, what we ask is you keep your comments to 3 minutes. And when you get up, state your name and that you're a resident of Hastings, if in fact you are. And so with that, I'll pass it over to the community for public comment. Please, and come on up to the mic, please.
Good evening. Timmy Downey, 520 Farragut Parkway, a resident of Hastings since 1970. First, I'd like to say Lisa and Maureen asked some good questions, the things I was actually going to ask. There was a lot of material to cover. This evening I wasn't expecting to have a conversation or be in a conversation about the bond. I also want to apologize for walking in early this evening. No idea. So what I wanted to speak about tonight, oddly enough, was about cost and finances. Oh, and if I may backtrack on one thing. Years ago, I suggested to the village trustees, it might be something to do here in the future, put a little clock up so people can kind of pace themselves when the 3-minute comments. The village did it, has worked out well. What I get concerned about is what I call the Lafergie Edgewood indicator. Over the years since early 2000s, I've seen a growing number of vehicles parked on those roads. And what those vehicles to me would represent is staff meaning labor. You can't get that same sort of indicator around this facility here because it could be students driving to school. What I get concerned about when I start seeing these numbers, I'm sure everyone gulped when they saw these numbers here tonight, it would be nice if, it feels to me like we're sort of getting into a space now. When we came out of the crisis of 08, decade has passed now, it seems to me the purse strings are getting a little looser, people feeling good. And my concern is we don't get ourselves into a trap down the road. I hear all the extra staff being hired now. That could be replacement staff or they could be new staff. But just ballpark, even a starting person, all costs in might be $100,000 per new hire. And you take that over 8 new hires, that's $800,000 a year. You do that with, 5 years, and you're looking at $4 million in costs right there. And then there's legacy costs beyond that. So what I'd like to do is to ask the board going forward, because this is something I thought about back in June, seeing the indicator up on the hillside. You're tasked with a big thing here with this bond, and I don't know where we are coming out of the Fields bond and how our financial state is with that. But there's a concern we have to balance with labor, which is our greatest cost, and facilities, and how that trajectory goes going forward, so that we understand our rate of change. And our rate of change, while if it was graph, and I'd love to see stuff put on graphs, it makes it easier on the eyes to interpret it, is while our rate of change may stay somewhat uniform, as we continue to grow, that rate of change, while by percent will be smaller, its dollar amount will be greater based upon somewhat of a fixed pool that you can draw from based upon the parameters of Hastings. There was a board member years ago who I asked one time when we had a crisis in the early 2000s, we were having like 11 or 10% increases in one year, went down to 8. She said, well, it went down. I said, no, it didn't go down. Your rate of increase went down, but it didn't go down. So I just want to make sure there's a proficiency here in terms of really looking at the numbers. And Maureen, you've done an excellent job over the years, and I've had conversations around this type of stuff, but there's some new faces here that I don't recognize. They may have good finance skills, but they don't have the understanding the history. And so my last comment is, the thing concerns me when I see these building renovations, I always see scaffold going up and pointing work being done. And do we have a good history record on this building in those certain areas? Do we have it either on paper document or in software? Like we say, hey, wait a minute, we did work on the west side of the facilities here only 8 years ago. Why are we doing it again? Because one thing I say from the repointing standpoint, it never works out as well as the original work, which will last 40 years, and repointing falls apart in 7 years. Because the skill and the craft is in there, plus just the way the chemistry works, it doesn't hold up as well. So I like to participate perhaps in these facility discussions. I bring a certain level of expertise to it, and I can help and answer questions and be one of those critical eyes to make sure we're spending our money carefully. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments? Jim?
If I may just add, that's great that you have skill and interest, and whatever else may happen, if eventually some sort of bond is passed, I would love to see somebody like you participate in the construction management end of it on a committee that would do that, because that's typically what schools do, is they try to bring people in from the community to help out that way.
Because I'll tell you, on the outside perspective, from the other side, contractors love schoolwork. It's cash cow. It's cash cow. Anyone I know who's in it, they salivate for it. So it's one of those things where it's general money. No one watches it like their own personal household money if they're doing a renovation and so forth. So that's the other side of the equation, oftentimes.
I don't disagree with you on that, but look, there are some projects that come in on time and under budget, and others that go way over budget, way late. So management counts for a lot, even in this business.
Thank you.
And on that, we do have we have our facilities committee, but we also have, you can correct me, but we also have a bond committee within that?
No, same.
Oh, maybe we were doing that in the spring? We didn't have a larger one with community?
We did. We had a, we had a
Facilities committee.
Facility that had about 10 or 12 committee volunteers from the community that we had sent out something. And
is that committee still meeting?
It met
It's met today.
Unfortunately, like, people who had RSVP'd, only one of them showed up. There was only about 6 or 7. I mean, well, then around 4, so...
So I guess the statement to the community is that we are reaching out. All our committee meetings are fully open to the public, and public input is great.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Okay. So we'll move on to item...
You have one more.
Oh, sorry.
Hi, Eileen Charles, 41 Fraser Place, Hastings. I have a upcoming ninth grader, Timothy, and just moved into college this week, so been around a while. One point of sensitivity to any increase in taxes, as we all know, our homes have all been reassessed recently, and some people are really suffering and forced to move because of it. So very high tax rate. So I know there'll be some public interest in that. A couple of things. Welcome to Superintendent Wilson. So nice to meet you. And moving ahead a minute, just looking at the education, the Board of Ed goals, there's just a point of clarification, just wondering if item 2, the curriculum learning and instruction, is going to be including a hire of a curriculum director. I know that's been a question.
Yes.
So, and the other thing that was mentioned earlier, that Dr. Kasman will be coming back to report and to see how things are going, and just wondering what that date is.
Well, we've been trying to nail down a date, and we had hoped originally that it would be in September. She wants to come back and talk to people first and see what progress has been made, and then come back on another occasion to give a full report at a board meeting. As I said, we were hopeful that this would all have been accomplished in the September-October period, but because of her schedule, it now appears that she's not going to be able to come down here until maybe October, and then presenting in November, late November, something like that.
Okay. Great. Okay, a few people have asked, and they just want to get it on their calendar, so.
When we have exact dates, we'll let you know for sure.
Okay, great. Thanks very much.
Okay, we'll move on to business items now. We've got quite a few items, as tends to happen over the summer. Does anybody have any questions about any of the business items? No, we're good.
I have one question. I just see it now, but it's very... How much does the cafeteria budget change year over year, just roughly?
Actually, I mean, so the cafeteria budget, just to be clear, is self-sustaining, right? We contract it out. Our sales actually went up a good amount this year, so I would say that this was the largest increase. That I want to say it went up like 25% over last year, or from the prior year to that in terms of sales, which is a good thing. Now, our cost of food was also much higher, so the amount of money that we netted was not, but that's fine, because we're not, we try to keep our
just to have it be offset.
So it actually went up substantially. I think last year the sales were up like 80,000 or 90,000, so that was
okay.
So, and we just set that budget based upon like prior year actuals and maybe increase it like 5 to 10%.
Okay.
And also if we get like larger enrollments occasionally, like the 5 through 5th grade, as the middle school is larger, that tends to drive our sales. So.
I also just wanted to mention item 9 and just appreciate the donation of a wireless scoreboard to the district.
I just had a couple of these are more for informational. Maybe they'll help me a little bit, other board members, maybe the public. So 2 through 6 seem to be negotiating the special ed contracts. Is that?
Yeah, so these are just...
Is that usually over the summer yearly when those are put forth, or is that?
You know, a lot of these, I mean, most of them are not even, they're just renewals
They're open.
Of different contracts, and some of them are for placements in other districts, some of them are for, we have done RFPs for these service providers in the past, so a lot of it, they have an established rate, and it'll typically just go by like a CPI change, like on some of, like the learning shop, for example. And then the rest of them, some of them do not change every year, but this is not, yeah, so this is just a renewal of every year. We're not allowed to have multi-year contracts. We have to renew our contracts every year.
Okay. Another thing, a question I was just wondering is, and this may be a broader conversation, we can have it later if we need to. Number 14, the Schedule B positions. Do we have a central repository of job descriptions, expectations, and hourly expectations for each one of those positions?
We do. I think this past year we attempted. We have some job descriptions, and we attempted to kind of do an audit of that, and we did get some updated information, and we made changes to that. I think there's still some work to do in that area, but as far as some of these newer positions, I have to say they're better defined than you find the challenges with some of the older ones.
The older one, yeah.
For many years, a lot of the newer positions, when they're created, there's a pretty good job description that's associated with them. I know that Dr. Wilson, even in terms of some of the newer ones that we're appointing tonight and that were agreed to on this HTA side letter, he had an opportunity to meet, like with some of the larger dollar ones, with a person who described what the work would look like and kind of give a real sense of the work with a good comprehensive job description.
Okay.
So we're trying to fix the
So is that
old
something
ones.
we should try to do more of this coming year?
Yeah, I think that, like I said, anything that I would say in the last 4 to 5 years are probably better defined because they come as a result of like a side letter negotiation. And it's sometimes some of the ones that we've had for like 20 years that tend to not be as well defined, or defined but maybe needs to not be.
It's unusual for me to work with a teacher's contract where the Schedule B is modified every year.
Right.
Normally you have a contract, it's a 5-year contract, you don't go near it. That's it. Now, on the other hand, the fact that you do it annually, I think your program is probably more responsive to what kids are interested in and where the needs change and so forth. So it's worth the effort maybe to do it that way, but it is unusual to, a lot of schools just wouldn't do that.
The only thing I would like to see changed in that process, I think I may have mentioned it to you, that process has to move back to the budget season, because what the challenge is that what we ended up with the issue last year with some of the coaches and some of the other positions, these are being negotiated in late June and sometimes through the summer. So as things are being added, we don't have time to address the budget, right, like for that. And it's one thing when there's a few, an $800 gaming club and a few items, but as you can see with the side letter, there were quite a few items that were definitely necessary, things that we had to address, either modifications to compensation that was really needed to be, it needed to be addressed. But again, these were not things that were on our radar when we developed the budget, but when you collectively, and so a lot of different people know about a lot of these, but when you put it together, it was a fairly substantial increase to our budget. So the one thing I would hope that the HTA leadership can start working on that process earlier with the superintendent so we can reflect it. And as we think about our budget, we can also make modifications if we want to continue to add to this.
Good idea.
And most of the time, I would say, quite often, the new organizations did reflect board priorities.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So there were definitely a lot of the new positions that although, right, there were things that I would say that were aboard MTSS coordinator, coordinator of diversity and inclusion, as well as the multicultural book fair were things that were district priorities as well. So quite a few of those were.
What is the CPI trainer?
That is for, there's 3 people district-wide that are certified to be able to train. It's in like restraint training for to if a child is having it needs to be physically restrained. So we have trainers, people on staff who are actually taking that extensive training.
Okay.
And then they run trainings, they train our teachers or leads or assistants.
Got it. Thanks.
Is it crisis? What is the, I'm trying to remember the acronym for it. There's like actually 2 different ones, but that doesn't matter, but that's what it is.
And I do just want to point out, because you mentioned about that we are having a diversity coordinator, and I know that that was something that I really want to thank our Race Matters Committee, because that was in their presentation. I think it may have been a director, but this is a start, and I'm just really grateful that we're starting with that. And it's, anyway, thank you to all who made that possible, and many, many thanks to the work of the Race Matters Committee for their incredible presentation and putting that together.
When we
I had one more question.
go to vote on this from items 1 through 18, I thought we should either pull out or just acknowledge number 16, which is approval of the HTA contract, which I think is a really, I think it's wonderful that we were able to do that. As Charlie mentioned before, that he came in with 3 contracts having been negotiated for this year, but I think it.
Okay, happy to do that.
Attention to that is really important.
Okay. I did have one other question about number 18, the resolution. Can you just give us a practical understanding of the implication of that from your perspective, Maureen? So for example, we're thinking about the waterfront development, which could potentially turn out to be a whole host of condos, which could have obviously a challenging impact. So if I read this, and I read the Keenan Bean document, if I read this, any new condos would then be priced as, market rate.
As a residential, right now.
Right.
Or taxed, not priced, but
taxed
as a
price for
residential.
taxing.
They're taxed, right now condos in all the town of Greenberg are not, their tax rate is based on like not
Right.
homestead, and their rate that they pay is based on rental value, like it's more of a business model than the actual value of the home. So I think, and I understood that was a challenge when they reassessed in the town of Greenberg. They had contemplated making, at that time, they could have taken all of the condos and townhomes that would have fallen into this and actually converted them. But I think there was a big pushback because anyone who was already in those homes would have had a tremendous, their property would have been devalued.
But this helps us as we think about waterfront, right?
Yeah. So, and if you had a rental, I don't know if there's any others left that have not converted to, but if you had a like rental building that were to convert, that would also apply here. But I think everything that was rentals converted, right? Like 550 converted already. So.
Right, okay.
So what happens in terms
of
of
waterfront? Is not rental.
Well, so if there's condos built on the waterfront, they're taxed as residential properties now, not the way condos.
Substantially,
So it's one of the big concerns.
In the way, the amount that they would pay.
So, okay. So that was helpful. I just want to clarify that.
And really, the people who make the most off it are the developers, and it's like you don't want to hurt the homeowners because the developers.
Well, the developers make a ton of money.
They make the money.
It's same cost of building, but you get to sell it higher because you get to deliver a tax break to the buyer, right? So, no, it's very good for us.
Yeah, it is.
In the running a school business. It's much better that the tax and revenue comes here. So.
Yeah. Okay. So, do I have a motion to take 1 to 18, removing 16, for a separate vote by consent agenda?
So moved.
Do you have a second? All in favor? Okay. And with regards to approving the HTA contract, do I have a motion to approve that? Second? Second. All in favor? Great. Thank you. Just remind me, the administrator's contract, did we vote on that last meeting? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, typically the MOA, we don't always bring the full contract back. And I think the teachers have it's a little bit more complex and there's different changes in the document, so it's just to kind of update. And there was a change in the instructional days that I think was important to bring back because in the previous contract, it spoke to like how many superintendents. We made that change in this document after approving tonight.
Okay, and 4B?
And I'm sorry, just one minute. Wait. The schedule days are coming up.
They were already done.
They already did.
They were in here. They were in
Then I think-
14.
Then let's also announce that, did we announce the name of our diversity coordinator? I don't know.
I think that's
Oh, yeah, she
in...
was actually, that was on.
That's in a
oh, no,
different-
it's
That's under
personnel.
personnel.
It's
We
under
had that
personnel.
conversation.
I just want to make sure we...
Reestablish it and then personnel.
Okay, so 4B, placement and services for CSC, CPSC. Does anybody have any questions there? Okay. So,
Do we have a typo? It says the 2017-18 school year?
No, they do it in reverse sometimes. They revert back sometimes. You'll see on other agendas that the years are not always the current years.
Especially at this time of year, we may still be getting from the previous.
Yeah, there's two, right? There's a 2017-18 and there's 2018-19.
so do I have a motion to approve the 4B, placement and/or services for CSC, CPSC?
So moved?
A second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, personnel. Remind me again, can we take, well, we'll go through, Janine, what do we have to do here? Just remind me. What do we have to do? Just take
We
these?
can do this all together. We can
You
do
take
all
them all
this
together.
together.
Can I just ask a question? For number one, Jeanette Coker, she used to go through a tenure process?
Just like Chris. Just like Chris, yeah, also, remember when he left the classroom teacher?
But she was the director of guidance.
But she was she was actually tenured as a guidance counselor. She was just getting a Schedule B as that.
Oh, okay.
But it was like previously.
So it's the same title, but it's a
Correct.
different... Right.
And your recent Schedule B appointments for Julie's Toledo being appointed on the document.
Yes, yeah, that our diversity coordinator is Denise Mateo Toledo, who's been a long-term ENL teacher here, and she's the chair of our ENL services, and it's just wonderful. And I think she's working on her doctorate, highly accomplished, and just I feel that we're really fortunate to have her.
Does anybody else have any questions on 5A, B, C, and D and E? A, B, C, D, E.
Wait, sorry, Maureen, was there a question about babies?
No, I said that as, there may be like something that comes back later, like if the schedule allows for it.
For the diversity coordinator to have...
Because that's how it was originally presented, but that's not what was approved. But if there's an opportunity, like as she goes out throughout the year, to have that.
So there's a potential for release time coming up, but we're not deciding that at this moment?
I just, Maureen, I have one question on the amendments. I saw for the 17-18 school year, there was like a $59,000 number. Was that like an amended salary number?
Which one are we looking at?
I think it was under the Gunther document.
Oh, yes, so, like there was...
I wasn't looking at her in particular, I was looking at the...
Yeah, so what happened was when we went to load her salary this year, the document we had gotten, her credits, so in addition to the salary column and being a teacher, the salary they receive for that, if they have additional credits over 75, they also get additional payment. And but those each one of those credits only has a 7-year lifetime, so they drop off. So they actually have to be manually calculated. So when the information came from the personnel department, they had it correctly dropped off like a few of her credits. So technically, when we went to look at this year, we're like, I think she may have been, because they dropped, and then we realized that they should have dropped last year. So we make an amendment, and then the teacher, it just comes off, they pay it back through salary.
Okay.
It's just an amendment to her salary this year. It's like
Okay.
an amendment.
I think I understand that, but
Yeah,
we'll go back.
The problem
and,
is because of these credits that people receive, and each one, when they apply it, they could have earned it like 15 years ago, but they can wait to apply it, and from the time they apply it, it has to run for 7 years.
Okay.
It's not good language, that's something to do.
Does anybody else have any questions about 5A through E? No. Okay. Do I have a motion to approve 5A through E, personnel? A second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay. So we are on to new business board goals. Just for the edification of the public, very briefly, these were some stuff that we worked on as a board on August 6th, but also they're reflective of a variety of conversations we've had over the past year. And in fact, a variety of input we've had from public over the past year as well. So I'll throw it out to the board and see if anyone's got any thoughts. We don't have to officially vote on these, but we will just kind of come to a sense of consensus in this meeting that these are our goals, and then what we'll do is take working draft off of them in whatever format is most we agree on, and put these up on the website for the public.
Yeah, and I would just add, thanks, Doug. I mean, I would just add that this really an addition for the public, less the board, but a lot of time and effort has gone into creating these goals and building alignment amongst us around these goals. And so hopefully, anyone that's either in the audience currently or seeing us, in video in the future, you too will pull these goals. And the objective of these is they act as a centering, as they act as a rudder for us over the course of the year. And so as work comes up and as different items and topics come up, as they tend to do over the course of an academic year, we'll look at them and try to sort them. How do they align with the goals that we're working towards this year? Are they separate and distinct from the goals? If they're separate and distinct, how do we fit this new issue or item within this structure of the goals? But the objective here is to have a pretty clear structure that we're working towards, and that you, the public, have an idea as to what we're working towards. So.
Does the board feel comfortable adopting these as our boards?
Very inclusive framework of a wide range of areas that we need to be focused on.
In addition to putting them on the website, I think it would be good for us to just have them in a slide every meeting. Just not all the details, but the 1, 2, 3, because I think, as you said, it's a sort of centering and keeping us focused. And I think new people will come to meetings that aren't here today, and I think it's good for us to just remind ourselves, about the overarching goals as well.
The one comment I would have is now that the timing has aligned, that we do have a diversity coordinator, that perhaps we run number 3, diversity inclusion, by her, only because I don't know that I feel confident in setting this up. Like, I'm just looking at the one about continue to develop and implement plans to improve multicultural literacy across the district. It may be that, and we've had some issues with that in the past, it may be that Janice has maybe concrete ideas on, do we establish a committee? I don't know, but it just seems that if we're going to give life to her position, that it would make sense to have her input on this before we, move forward with that particular one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my thought is around that, Lisa, is the following, which is that it's a goal, and our ability to realize the goal is just enhanced that much more by having Janice as the diversity coordinator, right? So she should absolutely see this, and I think we as a board need to make an effort to get her input, is exactly, I think, what you're saying, right? Like, it doesn't change. Like, our goal doesn't change. Our goal doesn't change whether somebody's in that spot or not, but now that she's in it, she's going to help us, I think, really realize that goal, and she should be pulled in.
Have we created a realistic goal? Should we be aiming for other things? She may have insight on finessing the goal. I guess that's what because
yeah, and I think that's sort of
bring more more to it than I certainly could.
Yeah, and I think it sort of becomes like a kind of a semantic issue. She may say like, look, you know what, develop and implement plans to improve multicultural literacy. It's not how I would have phrased it. This is how I would have phrased it, but this is what I would like to see happen. The phraseology is less important than the what I would like to see happen piece of that. And so there, I think, really getting Janice involved in this and being a voice directly to the board is really the important thing there.
Yeah, I mean, my take on that is, to take your example, Lisa, she may want to put a committee together, or she may want to, all of that could still fall under the third bullet. That's how she's taking up developing and implementing a plan to improve it. There's 1,000 ways, if you look at every bullet on this list, there's 1,000 ways to go about it depending on who you are that's tasked with that thing. And so I think there was an intention to really write this in a very open and expansive way that the professionals in the district could take it and do what they do as professionals to realize these goals. And I think there was some real caretaking into writing them in a very kind of open end state format as opposed to a prescriptive process way.
Well, I guess, but see, this is where I get a little concerned. What's the word? The negative implication. We've listed 4 bullets. That means those are our 4 priorities. But suppose, suppose Janice shares with us that teachers of color would like to have affinity groups. Maybe there's a way to, we have ensure hiring practices aligned, but maybe there's a whole separate thing about how do we maintain our new staff of color. All I'm saying is that if we value her and have enough respect to give her this important position, I would just like her input to see, like, are we missing something, or do we have something that doesn't belong here? And I think that also shows our respect for what we're asking her to do.
Let's do something like this, right? Which is we align around these, we post them. You kind of run with, you sort of run with and take, reaching out to Janice, digging through it, and if it makes sense to propose amending it or shift the alignment or drop a bullet and add a bullet, boom, we'll vote on it. If something comes of it, we amend it. Like, this is the thing. Like, the document's not like, okay, this is it. This is the 10 Commandments, where there was 15 shit, 5 broke, now we're down to 10. You know the joke. But you know what I mean? Like, we can amend it. We can amend it as we go.
Yeah, so...
and I think that's true of any of our goals here, that it's important to know that it's reflective of what we feel and what input of the community, and all of our goals are really open to being amended as we see needed.
Can I say one more thing, and I'll stop and be done for that? I will say this, and again, this is a bit of speaking to the public more than the board, but our 4th bullet, I just want to draw it out. Like, I really love this goal. You don't have it in front of you, unfortunately, but like, it's this 4th bullet of district and school culture, and I think that this is a goal that Lauren gets kudos for this one, and it's one of these things that I think it's what really makes Hastings is that, the schools have had a culture. Kids leave here after, 13 years, and they feel like, wow, this was a pretty unique place. And I don't think we have the answers to this is what the school culture is, but I think being cognizant of trying to maintain the culture that is Hastings and, address issues and topics that strengthen the culture, and part of why I say this to the public is getting feedback from the public around that. Like, this is what I consider to have been great in Hastings 10 years ago, and this is the direction it's going, and I'd like to see more of X. This is a goal that really opens itself to conversation over time. And culture is the hardest thing to identify, but you know it when you see it. And so it's one of these ones where I think to a certain degree we're fumbling trying to make sure we do the right thing by the culture of the district, and this is the goal where, and this is also true of diversity and inclusion, maybe these two together, they're the goal where I think it's really important that the community sees these goals and realizes that these are open conversations. You see somebody from this group of 7 around town and you have an opinion, please share the opinion. Because really to echo Doug, they're not prescriptive. They're broad, organic topics that we're trying to work on and identify, articulate, and improve with time. And so your help is you as in the public, your help is requested there. So that's it.
Doug, you might want to just read, since we don't have it posted, just read through, not each thing, but just the 7 goals, the topic of each one, just so people know what we're talking about.
Strategic planning, which is something Charlie will be really helpful in helping us move forward, which includes a needs assessment and a planning process. Curriculum learning instruction, which you could argue is the business of the district, the work of the district, not to use too many business analogies. Diversity and inclusion, district and school culture, which can be a variety of different things given the year. Fiscal and facility management, communication engagement with the public, and our superintendent search. So those are the 7. So, are we good? Okay. Good. So we'll consider those adopted and able to be amended as needed. So now on to board committees. There should be you all should have seen the committee memberships. We've spoken about these. Does anyone have any final questions before we adopt these?
I was going to say, I can be an alternate for Diesel.
Okay.
Theater Arts Committee.
Yeah, so members on theater arts. That is still, that's TBD still, yeah. Charlie's going to have
Theater arts is a daytime, yeah.
Theater arts is daytime.
Right after school, typically, like right after.
Yeah.
I'm happy to go as alternate. I just think that to say member, it's going to be tough for me to attend. So I put myself in as an alternate. I will scramble to attend if others can't.
So at one point we talked about Charlie kind of being the representative and liaison to that and reporting, back to us. So that may still be a way to go. I think there was talk about that committee was one that it really has its legs under it at this point in the game.
I think it's just the only reason it makes sense to either Charlie and I have attended those occasionally when we talk about something needed to be addressed in terms of finance
budget,
issues. And then it's just good to keep the board aware because it's like kind of its own department. It tends, they do a lot of work, but I think sometimes it does, and this is the board level, because they operate kind of separately. A lot of the people involved in the theater are outside of our typical, they work for us, but they're not on staff, right? So it'd be good to,
should we leave
it? Charlie and I just to go to it. If the topic, like Gerard can give us the agenda, and if we think there's something worthwhile, if it's just that they're doing like a housekeeping and setting their calendar, we don't have to go to that.
No, but I think it's important to have board representation.
Yeah, and you know what? I know Gerard.
Right.
Is it possible that I'm a member, and when he puts together the agenda, he sends it to me, and I can basically say, like, Gerard, I can't make it, but I want to ask, because I can have a direct conversation with Gerard to just get, and he'll feel comfortable just speaking to me and say, Tim, this is what's happening, or this is a big issue. So make me a member.
Well, I could be an alternate.
Yeah, fine. So make me a member, and you can let Gerard know.
The daytime meetings these days, but
and I think, and
I just think it's important.
Yeah, and I'll send him a text anyway, and just let him know that he needs to just keep me posted.
So one of the other things we talked about was having committees really get clear on their objectives for the year, and so if I think some of them it's kind of obvious, but still I think it's worth clarifying and just communicating those. So one of the things Janine and I have spoken about is getting committee pages up for the board. So there'll be a finance committee page or a policy committee, and it's members, meetings, objectives, list of minutes. Right? And so I think one of the things that's been challenging is if you're on a committee, if you want to know about, well, what's been going on in the finance committee, you've got to go through each board docs meeting, find them, sometimes there's not really minutes there, and so we want to tighten that process up. So again, it would be members, objectives, calendar, and minutes would be on each page.
And Doug, I would emphasize the calendar. I think we've all said it would be great to set out a year's worth of dates. And
I think we're doing pretty well on that. Yeah.
Do we have that for all of them?
Lisa Royce has been helping with a lot of them, right? Yeah.
That's been great. Yeah.
She's been really helpful.
And I like the idea.
What's that?
That's right, she's off during the summer, and as soon as she comes back,
schedule all these meetings. So
it'll be nice. Yeah, we have them for facilities, audit, and finance, and health and safety. I mean, there's some on the health and safety we're still trying to.
Yeah.
That's a difficult one.
And if we could post those,
So
Do we have any idea when any of the liaison meetings are the first go-round?
They're all on the PTSA calendar.
Okay.
And I think they may be on the district calendar.
They're all on the individual school calendars.
They're all on the website. Yeah, the first one happens really fast. It's like
that's
the
what I'm
first
just
week of school,
asking.
maybe, or the second week.
Somebody.
Of school?
Yeah, the dates
Like it
are.
might be the second day of school or something with this one. This one that really comes.
So just to keep us moving along here, I think we feel pretty good with a few of these changes. Does this look pretty good? Is everyone good with this? Okay.
Board committees?
Great. Board committees.
Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there was a nodding approval of the idea of people checking in at the board meeting, beginning to say whatever has been happening and where they're liaisons or where they're on a committee.
Oh, yeah.
We've always done that, Charlie.
We've done
brought
it.
that up.
And so Charlie brought it up as an idea to do at the beginning of the board meetings. And we've done it, well, I think it's two different things, right? Because one of the things, correct me if I'm wrong, Charlie, you were suggesting was, what's going on in the district that may not fall inside of a committee report as well? Is that accurate?
Yeah,
Right.
I'm thinking both things would be important. In other words, it entitles every member of the board and some of the administration to bring an item to the table at any meeting, but at the same time provides a vehicle to keep the rest of the board and the public up on the relationship that they have, what's going on with the various committees.
And Charlie, did you also mention that the liaisons for each school, like they can report out what's going on in that week?
That's right.
Like if there's if the people who are assigned to the elementary school, we then highlight the elementary, because typically the superintendent have been doing that, like, oh, this happened at the elementary school this week, the 100th day of school, so I think it's Jeremy and me.
That's hard, I think, because liaison meetings aren't.
Not the liaison meetings, you know how each person is, you can also go and meet with the principal, how it was years ago.
You can contact the principal of the school you're assigned to and say what activities are happening, what's coming up.
Yeah, because that's it, because people who are assigned to each school are kind of in contact with the principal of that school. Isn't that kind of the idea?
Necessary. I don't know.
Let's offline figure out how to tighten this up a little bit. I know what you're saying shouldn't be so formulaic in nature, but I think because we have some of these conversations at other parts during the meeting, people are wondering, well, where should I share what? And so maybe we'll just talk about that and figure out a way. Because I think one of the really valuable points, as Charlie brought it up to me and we talked about it, was it kind of forces the board to be really engaged at the beginning of meetings, and you got to think about, okay, what was important to me, or what big thing did happen, and kind of get you forward in your chair as opposed to kind of sitting back. So let's keep figuring out a way to make that happen. Okay, I think next conversation was topics for upcoming board meetings, and Charlie, working with Fee, has put together this list through the 17th of June. Did you want to talk a little about it?
Fee correctly labeled this Fee's working copy. And you can see how, for example, the special ed report alone, we're waiting right now to find out when that's going to be done. Clearly, when we have a date for that, you'd want to clear the decks to make sure that gets covered at that time. I've already suggested that for the meeting, the September meeting, 17th that is, that we do not have the APPR report, which I think Larry gives a good presentation, but I just think there's too much going on, and I do want to get the update on the part of the special ed to the board. And plus, if we did have more reason to have our continuing discussion about a bond, that gives us plenty to do. So you can see that it's not as easy as just, filling in the blanks. These really are moving parts, and I think it's going to maybe take us a little while for things to settle down. If indeed we're still talking about facilities into the winter. I mean, I don't know at this point where that's going to go, but we'll just have to adjust the calendar accordingly.
Actually, on this calendar, I'll let you know, the auditors are going to come September 17th to do their...
There you go. So
that makes...
There's a lot of competition for Board of Ed time.
Right. Okay. Well, this will also be, I think, an evolving document. We'll keep a live version
Absolutely.
On the website. Okay.
Yeah, this is good. This is very good.
Okay. There was a proposal, actually, Jeremy brought it up.
Are we leaving the calendar of items?
Yes.
I just have one question.
Okay.
Did the principals approve all the different topics, or has it been run by the principals? Because I see a conversation that we had last year that's on for this year, so I don't know if the principal wanted to come back and do it again, or...
Well, I had identified some topics that I think would be very interesting. So, for example, with the high school principal, the program they're doing on stress and so on, I think there were interesting things that each of them could do. But again, I've shared this with them, and to no one's objection. But I'm not sure again whether we can even do all this. I'm hoping we can, but I think we're just going to have to see how things play out.
But Charlie, to Lisa's point, I think it's a good idea to maybe ask them to look carefully if they're comfortable with what we're asking them to do, or do they want to propose some other thing that they present?
Well, I think yes, certainly, by all means, we can do that. We'll do it. But I think it's important, if it's feasible, to have the communication flow from the principals about their schools.
Yeah.
And it's important for the board to know that. So it's just a matter, really, of picking a time and a theme that perhaps would be most preferred.
Okay. The next item has to do with changing a board meeting
Real quick on
date.
the topics.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you talked about this when I was out. The bond proposal completion, March 25th, might be sort of after we've already done the vote, so you might want to just...
Again, Jeremy?
It says March 25th bond proposal completion. We might want to just move some of those dates up, like the bond, the 225, move it to 211, maybe move... So we'll probably have the vote by early March.
Well,
I think it'll get adjusted once we see what our schedule is.
We can set that as a goal.
Anyways.
We can set that as a goal, right? So what date was that? What date was the date you said? March 20th?
March 25th, but Veronica was saying it could be into early March, right?
Yeah.
Late February or early March.
Right.
Well, we can use that time for budget, some more detailed budget
Just
discussions.
moving that, like not where the bond would be, to your point, after a possible bond.
Okay. Jeremy found and pointed out this idea of the changing our meeting from November 26th to the 19th, right? Wasn't that? I'm going in the right direction there, right?
This is right after Thanksgiving.
It's right after Thanksgiving. It's the Monday after Thanksgiving. Is everyone okay with that? Okay.
Is there a reason to do that?
No, it's moving it away.
It's moving it
a week before.
a week before. So it's the Monday, because it's the day after Thanksgiving, and we may not have items prepared. It's a 3-week between the one before and the one after Thanksgiving anyway, so this is still a 2-week interval. Yeah.
And I would just say, know that the Tuesday night after is the project share dinner for anybody who wants to go, which I...
So that's the 20th.
The 20th.
Yeah.
The 20th.
So just so you have 2 evenings that night, that week. No, but that's fine.
Okay. Approach to minutes. So there's been a conversation. We started the conversation at the August 6th meeting, which was, how do we want minutes produced? I think there are broadly 3 different options that different districts can use. One is literally just saying, we had this discussion. Another is on the other side of the spectrum, having fully transcribed all conversations, and then there's something in the middle which could be some sort of 2-3 sentence processing of every conversation to give an indication of what was discussed, while it's not actually a full transcription of it. I think, just to bring us all up to speed, that the full transcription is probably about $6,000 a year. Obviously, nothing, just listing the stuff is pretty minimal. Something in the middle would require some time and energy on the part of Janine, and I think, the question is almost monitoring that, if we wanted to go that direction. How much time, how much energy is it taking? Is the process working? Because that one becomes just a little bit more of a gray area to manage. So with that, I'll throw it just out. Does anyone have any further thoughts on the topic?
I can just speak, because this was my issue. And I don't mean to get all out there in the land of democracy, but when I joined the board, one of the first things, and I called it boring but important, that I saw was I wasn't happy with our minutes. It was hard to read our minutes and appreciate the substance of what happened. And not the nitty gritty, but what was going on? What was the debate? Instead of saying there was a discussion about class size, there was a discussion about class size, there were this many kids, 4 more sentences would help me understand. But the reason I feel it's so important, and I use the words democracy, is this is how people know what we do. And it's how, some people can come here at night, some people have 2 hours to watch the video or they put it on the background, but most people don't. So to be able to take minutes that take you 5 minutes to read is, to me, really, really important. So to me, the only option that makes sense to me is that middle one. Transcription, I also think, is not helpful. To me, it would be an addition, but who wants to read through, 200 pages? Tonight's meeting would be a couple hundred pages. It's what law firms do when they drown you in paper. I also understand, though, that Janine wears 2 hats, and she's got a lot on her plate. So I'm going to talk. I've been thinking about this because I do feel that it is that important that we have good minutes. One option that I thought is we could put out either for pay or community service. Ask a student or a community member, if we want to put a price tag on it, I would say $50 a meeting. Do a real, good set of draft minutes that then go to Janine, that she then puts in a better form. I asked some seniors in the high school, they're like, well, yeah, we could do that for $50. Or it could be for community service hours. And that's not near the price of the transcription. And we wind up with meaningful minutes, cognizant of, you're being pulled in many directions. So anyway, I threw a lot out there. I do think it's very important. I think it's what the law requires of us. It's what good governance, as we talk about governance and trust and earning that trust, I think it's critical. And here's a way to do it if your job, you got too much pushed into 5 days as it is.
Just to be clear, I would agree with you, it's good governance, but it's not actually what the law requires. The law requires that you document the meeting, which a video is a documentation of the meeting. It may not be the best way to process the meeting.
Is that true?
That is true, yeah. That's what Stephanie said.
It's required emotions, actually.
Okay.
That's the only thing that needs to be recorded are emotions.
Which is, but you raise a good issue still, which is fine, but good governance may not be what is legally required.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think, Lisa, you raise an excellent point. But I think it's like the 4 questions, like the simple son. I think that's just way too simple. I think I would not vote to spend money to have it transcribed, because, again, who's going to read it? And it feels like if we're trying to be thoughtful about how we spend money, there are a lot of other things we could do with that $6,000. But I think, I think this is what you've basically done, Janine, right? But just sort of take the minutes and the agenda and and annotate it a little bit and fill it. I mean, sometimes it's just a matter of, the board voted, 5-2 to approve the whatever. And other times, if there was a discussion, to list what the points were on each side of the discussion. It's not ideal. It's not maybe perfect reporting, But again, we do have the videotape, recorded document, if somebody was really interested in a particular part of the meeting, they could go to the videotape and see the replay, you know.
I know we talked about on the retreat linking certain clips of the video. Is that still something that we could actually feasibly do? I know we were wondering about it. Is that...
I can timestamp it.
Okay. So maybe that's sort of...
Combination.
A combination and meeting in the middle ground for that, so you're not really worrying about a super transcribed minutes, but you can go, if you're interested in the one option, you can find it easily, and maybe thinking about how Board Docs does it, because I know Board Docs is a little hard to navigate sometimes.
I think that's a good idea. I mean, I had brought this up originally because I don't like the fact that there wasn't consistency. One person sort of writes, you know, a whole list of bullet points that they took a long time to think about, and another person speaks at the meeting and it looks like they said nothing. So I think, you know, avoiding that is I think, what I'd like to see in the minutes. So if it's timestamp or this hybrid method, I think that makes sense. I do think that people who aren't able to get here should be able to look at the minutes and get a gist of what happened in the meeting, but I also don't think that it should be sort of, you know, let me, you know, position my thoughts, and everyone's kind of either positioning their thoughts, or two people are and the others aren't. I think that's where the minutes sort of, you know, kind of veer off on the wrong path.
I would agree that time stamping is a good solution for in between, because I would be reluctant to have a community member as honest or as upstanding as that service might be, or even if it were paid. It's impossible not to be unbiased in reporting what you're saying, and then now to have to go through it and review it and see where those biases are and train a person to be unbiased in the reporting would be a level I think we don't need to get involved in.
So what's your thought on the summation, the 2 or 3 sentence summation?
A summation would be fine, and that's what the process of us either you know, approving the minutes. If we don't agree with the summation, then that's the point where we can say that summation didn't include my point that I was trying to make an argument, and I think that's the reason why we have that approval process.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I was just going to mention, I had done at one point for like a year the minutes with the board, and that was back when we used to do like a lot more heavily reporting. Beyond having someone here, and Janine could attest to this, beyond the meeting, when we used to do them in that way, you'd have to go back and listen to that meeting and rewrite the comments multiple times. So I would say probably, even if you were to have somebody do it beyond sitting at the meeting, which would be 2 to 3 hours, and again, to go through and then try to write people and capture what they're saying in, like I said, in an unbiased way. It did, I mean, I remember doing it when we tried to make them a little bit more, like it would say, like, you know, what you just said, basically trying to summarize it. It would take like maybe 8 hours a week. And the other issue was that we weren't timely with the approval of the minutes. I mean, if not only me, like when other people did it, because when they were longer, we occasionally, technically they're supposed to be approved by the next meeting, right? Is it, or in draft, they could be a draft,
I was
right?
going to say, you have to post them within 2 weeks of the meeting, and they can still be in draft. I don't know that there is a window on how long the approval is.
But I would be concerned to have somebody outside of, like, and not that I want to change it, but I think almost the district clerk should be doing it, and if not somebody like on the staff, but you have to have somebody that could do it within like, and know it's going to take them like 10 hours, and possibly depending on how lengthy you want them to be, maybe less.
We were just at the point where I just felt we were
getting too
skimpy. Like public comment didn't list everybody's name, and like I'm actually going to suggest that we don't approve the following minutes, because like it said, when we were talking about the community feedback about filling the vacant seat, it said there were whatever 105 responses, but it doesn't even summarize what the discussion was, and then like that's just too spare.
Right. No, I think with the board docs, and actually Janine, in fairness, when we got the board docs product, I remember the person was kind of advising the district at that time to kind of, they looked at what our current practice was, and at least the thought process at that time was to, at least by the recommendation, you had just come on board at that time, they said, you need to really just, you know, really summarize it because they had seen what our process was. So to your point, I think it probably, like, I think there was something to the way the minutes, if you look back, there's times you can really
Yeah, no, I saw
understand
some, they were longer, and I've been looking at all, I've been looking at Scarsdale's minutes, Ardsley's minutes, so
But you just
there's
need
a
the
lot of
time,
different
so-
ways to go.
Right.
Yeah, I polled all the district clerks, which I did share with you, and most of them have gone to very sparse minutes. They really don't record much, and even when the public speaks, they don't even list who speaks from the public for a lot of school districts. And others will just say, this person spoke and the topic was this, but not make any reference to how they addressed the topic, just the name and the topic. I think what's happened in this past year during board meetings, we've gotten into some very heated and controversial discussions, and that's hard to interpret, to create minutes that would be fair based on the discussion that ensued. That's why we kind of left it to watch the video. If you want to know what happens, watch the video. Because sometimes they get into this really gray area left for interpretation, and am I going to say, was it an extraordinarily, uplifting, cohesive discussion? Was a vehement discussion? What do you want? Because it gets really difficult to put the tone in, or leave the, either you have to leave the tone out and just say, this person discussed this and said, raise these issues, but, I don't want to be putting in people's tone so much.
I don't think tone should be part of it.
And I think we did have some heated discussions. I'd like to say respectful discussions. I don't know that the tone has to be there. I think, and it's all of our jobs to look and see if we're comfortable with how it's been summarized. And just because it's hard is not a reason for us not to do
We've amended
it.
the minutes. I've amended them when someone has said, this is what I stated. It's been sent to me, and I've amended it to whoever sends me.
But I guess all I'm saying is, even if it's difficult, or we're having a lot of back and forth, it's up to us. You put it together and whatever. It's up to us to look at it and make sure we're all comfortable with it, and then we all feel that it's accurate.
I don't think there's any reason to put the tone, to have tone in it. But also, Janine, I wonder, and I don't know, would it be possible that during the meeting you would just sort of take some notes as we go through the agenda, so that you don't have to go back and listen to the whole...
Normally, that's normally how I've done them, but now they've gotten too complicated, or like because I was running the slides and then things skip around and I can't keep up with it all the time because I miss the salient points that some of you are making.
I see.
So I have to go back and listen to it anyway. If it's a small agenda and an easy agenda.
Right. I'm just thinking, but then you could even at least skip through a lot of it if you have most, just to make it easier for you.
Well, that's how I normally do.
Yeah.
So can I throw a proposal out there? Because Janine, you and I spoke about this, which we'll try to do a couple sentences, maybe through September, October, next 2-3 months, and then just evaluate it. Hey, if I figured out a way I could do it in 2 or 3 hours a week, or seems to be taking me 5 hours a week, and then we can just revisit. But I think everyone's made a good point. It's incumbent upon all the board members to read them closely and then share back when they feel as though something isn't accurate. Because, as someone who a lot of times I do that for a living, it takes a lot of focus. It's not a simple skill set to do. So, is everyone comfortable with that?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to F, relationship between facilities and finance committee in a bond year. Do you, Maureen, want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think as Tim Downey kind of got up tonight, he kind of touched on what I would agree that we need to do as we're contemplating doing a bond. You can't lose sight of the other 5-year projections and how that fits in, because as we talk about, although some of the rates in itself wouldn't be terrible, you have to also consider there's other pieces that you have to consider in your budget growth over the next 5 years. So I think what typically will happen is, as the facilities committee is deciding what the programmatic and building needs are, the finance committee is also working in tandem, kind of lining those projections up with also just the regular budget growth. So I think as it they're always kind of closely related because anything that the facilities committee can come up with a lot of great ideas, not even in a bond year, but like, can we afford to do them, right? So there's always that relationship between the two. So I think because we're going to be meeting and having discussions as a board as a whole with the facilities committee, you know, it's something we'll keep in mind as we're looking at our 5-year budget projection. But I do think, to Lisa's point, I mean, there's things beyond just the increase in the budget road. We do have to understand that there is a benefit to doing a bond that does give you some budgetary relief as well as help you stay under the cap. So those are related as well. I think what else? I guess that's it, just in terms of keeping kind of the two.
Can I ask you just a quick question about that? You say $200 increase. How does that relate to, you know, the old bond is being completed, and so the debt, you know, paying off that loan and the interest is going away? So does it become somewhat of a wash at some point, or?
Well, obviously we just started to pay on that bond. This is, I think, we're in the second year, because although the project's done, typically we delayed the borrowing,
okay.
Right? So you can like lend money, you know, so you do it typically to try to, until, like I saw, you don't want the bond rate to go up. So no, that bond won't be dropping. That bond will drop off. If we were to issue another bond, we would still have another like 8 years or 9 years left of this bond.
Okay, so it's additive. Okay.
Or 10, it would be additive. But that being said, we did have a bond that dropped off that by the time we finally were able to borrow money for this bond, we still were paying on another bond. So we had thought we were going to have 2 bonds going on, so we actually had a drop off. Right now, like I said, the debt that we're paying net of getting state aid back, it's only like $400,000 a year, which I know seems like a lot, but it's not unusual for districts of our size to have $2 and $3 million obligations a year. So I think we do have to be smart. I don't think the facilities is tied to finance, that if you don't fix your facilities, you will have some financial problems. Like I've said to Joe, the idea of the boilers, we're not going to replace the entire boiler if it's not necessary. But my concern is we could retube those boilers for like a couple $100,000, and if they only last like 3 years, then the board would have to
throw that money away.
$600,000. That's when you have a big budget crisis, because then you're talking about you're making program cuts to pay repairs on your building, and it does happen to schools. So there is a financial component that you have to consider, that by not doing a bond, you actually cost taxpayers money, whether it be efficient type of windows. The windows that are being proposed at Hillside, I can tell you, were initially proposed in 2000 bond, and because we didn't have enough money, we scraped it when I first came here, like in that 98 bond. So they are well past, they're not energy efficient. Our heating bills are astronomical at Hillside. So I think there are probably financial waste of money that we would gain some efficiencies if we were to do the work. So,
quick question for you, just because you brought it up around other districts that would run, let's call it $2 million of debt service compared to our $400,000. Is there any rule of thumb regarding size of reserve balances relative to annual interest expense?
Well, yeah, so one of my concerns with, although I know the state controller is negative about having reserves, I will tell you that when you borrow money, it drops your rating when you don't have a certain amount of reserves. So a lot of districts will say, Glenn, you write a report, I'm not doing anything illegal, we're going to keep the money, because if you try to borrow money, you're going to pay a higher interest rate. So right now my concern is we're at that like teetering point. If our reserve balances continue to go down, our bond rating will drop, and then we will borrow money at like a 1 or 2% higher rate. And so
I was going to say, by the way, did you see, I think it was Newsday or the New York Post had an article today how they're cracking down on Long Island with the reserves, and I get it.
Because they're decreasing the reserves, right?
Yeah, they said, well, they're saying they have too much in reserves, and I get it. We want to have reserves, but it's this very hard push-pull against the comptroller.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, don't forget, anything that comes from the state, that's like their line to kind of, to go along with the governor saying schools will have money. I don't like, so a lot of that, I mean, I've heard that from people in the state controller's office, like this is their way of justifying that we don't have to give you more state aid. You will flush with money. You have plenty of money in your coffers. So there is a correlation, and I don't want to.
What is our reserve money?
Our reserve balance, I think at the end, I got to look at what it is in the total end of the year, was we dropped over $1.5 million in reserve balances this year, with another anticipated drop of $2 or $3 million over the course of this year. So we're down like $4 million over the past few years. Like, but now some of it was capital reserve, so.
And we were audited, we had to do it.
Well, we did and we did. I mean, I'll be honest with you, a lot of my colleagues are just like, they take it, if they feel comfortable in the budgeting practices and they feel it's not that we're taking the money and going out and just wildly spending it. We're trying to offset future budgets, and we have tax service. I actually, unfortunately, sometimes it is hard because you feel the pressure of the controller's office, but they're not going to come back and do anything to you as long as you stay compliant. We're technically allowed under the law to have that money. Right now, they're audited by our external auditors, which they'll go over. I mean, we have right now $8 million worth of tax cert claims against us, which right now we probably will settle. But, over the course of the year, so we always want to keep some money in the tax cert. Probably won't settle. You only settle those at about a third of what is being claimed. But as, if some of these properties and individual homeowners keep grieving their taxes because they're mad about the reassessment, I mean, we're constantly battling, like the reassessment piece. So we want to keep somebody in that tax cert. And then everything else is reserved for, like, that's reserved for a particular purpose. Like, that money's there to pay people back and we have. So I think, and actually well, I don't talk about the property that came online. Technically, they're under an LLC. They could probably, I don't know how that would work, if they could, like, look for a big tax rebate. But we do, I think it's responsible to have reserves personally. I think there is a fine balance in it. I was willing to take the criticism of the controller's office because I think it's the right thing to do by your taxpayers. I mean, the other option is when you have extra money, you just go spend it all at the end of the year. Is that being responsible? Like, I think when you have extra money, things happen in your budget. You could have, there's many reasons that you can have extra money at the end of the year. Because obviously you don't set a $50 million budget to the dollar. I mean, you couldn't survive that way. You're setting a budget you're doing it 6 months in advance of the actual year without knowing any of your student populations that are coming in, special ed population, there's so many variables, but anyway. So you always have extra money. We've kept it, we put in reserves, our reserves are coming down because we've needed to use them, and I think we just have to be thinking about that, keeping our reserve balances, making sure they don't drop too low, because when you go to borrow, it will matter.
Yeah, but I guess, is there any kind of rule of thumb among districts that say, if my tax, and I know all different sizes, I don't know that, we can't compare ourselves to Yonkers, right? Like the different sizes, it's apples and alligators. But is there a rule of thumb where you say, right now we have $400,000 to use your number of annual interest expense? You move, to a bond of X size, it gets to $1.1 million of annual interest expense. It gets to $800,000 of annual interest expense. Do districts, in your experience, try to have 1 times debt service in reserve, 2 times debt service in reserve, just because you don't want to get to the point where if your debt service gets so high, you have to pay the interest, right? Like, so if your interest expense in 1 year reaches a point where it's 2x your reserves, right, and all of your reserves disappear in 1 year to cover interest. So is there any?
The debt is always outside of the tax cap, so you'll always be able to levy for that money, and people can't vote that piece down, if that makes any sense. So, not typically. I mean, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I just try to give people the idea that not that we have to be Irvington, or I'm just to keep it in the context. Like, schools do spend money. Doing work at a school is much more expensive because we pay. Everything is through Wick's law. We have to bid out. It's public work. I can say that and Tim is great and he is a helpful resource. I can tell you, can ask Joe, we do care, like every dime that they're spending, I do pretend, I think of it as being my own money. We did come in under budget on our last project, so we do take it very seriously, but I do think that we can't lose sight that it looks like a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not.
But but I guess there's just like, there's no real rule of thumb?
No.
Okay.
And the last time we did a bond of $8 million, Dodge Ferry, who already had bonds out, took out $17 million, and they're doing another bond. Irvington, as we know, is constantly building. Now they're looking to even modify their complex. So those are just examples of districts that we're aware of that have most districts having $25 million worth of debt for our size district would not be considered excessive, that's all. If the need exists, because these are buildings, just like your own home. I mean, how can you expect these buildings that are huge, you know, worth hundreds of millions of dollars, for us not to spend money on them? You know, when people spend $100,000 on their home, we're spending $100,000. We had $100,000 in capital reserve fund this year in our operating budget to work on this building, both of these buildings. When you think about it like that, like that's, people do $100,000 kitchen renovations in 2,000 square foot home. So it's, you know, we cannot continue to go on with like this. If we don't have a bond, even for next year, we may, depending on the building needs, we may need to consider upping that, which it's going to.
Yeah, no, I think the option one is the option one is a given. Right. I think the reason for my, like, it's a given, right? Like you have a, like, you know. It's not a given. I mean, ultimately, it has to be voted upon. But the compelling case is very strong. I guess the reason for my question is, and the reason for asking it now, is trying to manage that relationship between facilities and finance. And in finance, you're looking at the school's operating budget, and it's in current year and, you know, years in the future. And part of an operating budget is having reserves, where if we increase our debt obligation, which we're going to, you know, high probability do with a bond, then that marriage of those two, increased expenses associated with interest expense, married to our annual operating budget, how do we think about the reserves relative to this additional line item? So that's really the gist of the question. We don't have to have an answer now. We don't have to walk away with it. And I'll sort of continue to play with it in my head, and we'll all sort of tinker with it in finance committee. But that's really and you pointed to a really good thing there, which offline I'll want to look at, and maybe others on the board will want to look at as well, which is, so now we have two other data points that you just put out there in terms of Irvington and Dobbs that have borrowed a lot of money relative to us in the last decade. Well, what does their interest expense relative to reserve ratio look like? How are other people? And that's not to say, however they do it is the right way.
They've just started to build, but Irvington for many years had no reserves.
Yeah.
And then that's why they couldn't settle the teacher's contract for so many years, because they just didn't. They had no tax cert reserve. They didn't believe in they were just spending it. So where we were more conservative with, I don't mean to, like, I'm just saying, I'm not saying current administration, but those things take years to happen, right?
Yeah. You know, as I'm listening to this conversation, I think something that could be very useful, and this is a bit of a broad, I mean, it connects to the finance facilities conversation. It connects to the strategizing you're doing, Maureen, which is, you know, I think that everyone lives in their house, everyone pays their taxes, and they go, I'm paying a lot of money, and that's all they think about. But what I think people don't think about is, what is the district's philosophical approach to financial management and to budgets? And, you know, I think that absent that understanding, everything just looks like a number. And I think I think that there's an education piece around bonds when you talk about the bond, and, you know, what, $10 million if you're paying 25 grand in taxes is $200. I mean, that's good, and we've got to have all this stuff. And I think there's also a broader perspective about what is our debt? What is our approach to reserves? I mean, there is just a broader understanding, and I'm not sure exactly how to do it in a productive, easy way, but you know, one of the things I often sense when we're having these conversations, Maureen, is that you're like, I'm working my butt off over here, and I think sometimes some of you don't realize just what the heck I'm doing, right? And I think that, like, that's true to some degree, right? And the level of conscientiousness and really conservativeness that you bring to the district, I think, is probably underappreciated.
I actually think that last word is the right word, and it's that word that I think everybody that's a taxpayer wants to hear. We're bending over backwards to remain conservative, and let me show you how. And I think that that's the kind of and you hear it. Tim Downey's question wasn't that, but that's ultimately what he's asking. And I think what you're saying is, look at, I don't want to point fingers, you know, at other districts, but look at a district that didn't have any reserves for tax certs. You're basically saying, look at how we've operated for the last decade. It's pretty darn conservative. And your community members are saying, show me that this is conservative. And so that word is really such a core word of without it being defensive, but just being factual. This is how we've gotten to where we are. These are the.
Well, I think finance always devolves into a numbers conversation, but rarely does the philosophical stuff come out. And that's what I think is so important, because if the philosophical stuff comes out and you have to make sometimes a challenging financial decision that really requires a lot of money, I think that if you're grounding it contextually in the philosophical approach that's at the base very conservative, you can get some leeway from if the community's not aware of that and they're just looking at their own tax bill, they're just like, "Whoa, you just want more money from me? What is this?" Right?
And yet, I think that Maureen has a wealth of information and knowledge and understanding.
And there's a lot of things that play into that. And I would like to say that, there's a lot of people, even with our contracts, I think that up into this contract, our unions really have always come to the table, in my mind, with the mindset of understanding that, Hastings doesn't have a big tax base, and a lot of people are, we do try to work to the best within our budgets, and that takes a lot of people, right? It takes a lot of people doing extra things to kind of make it work, and we understand we have a lack of tax base here. But the other thing I was going to say, but all of our spending is that way. There's plenty of things we do that it's community decisions, right? Like class size, like all these things have impacts on the budget. But I think the one thing we can't lose sight of, the facilities to me is one of those things that the maintenance of the facility is not questionable. You know what I mean? Like we have architects, like that's not something other than maybe a building addition. Those aren't like things that, those are, I would say, that's what I was saying, the board has to understand that is a requirement, that you talk about financial things, like that's something you have to say, we have to do this. Like this is not a class size issue, this is a
I agree with that 100%. Not only do you have a responsibility to be fiscally prudent, you have a responsibility to maintain the facility. And that requires ongoing investment. And I don't know of schools that get into financial problems because they've invested too much in their buildings. The real danger here, the cautionary tale, is you have something called fund balance. You've got to be very careful because it's very easy to turn to that every time you need to pay the bills. But then you're kidding yourself. If you don't increase your tax to pay for the things the added things that you're buying for the school system, be it teachers, be it programs, be it whatever, if you're living off of your balance, there will come a day that the balance is gone. And then you'll owe a gazillion dollars that you can't raise over the cap. That's the danger. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. And that was the reason we really went up on the levy this year, because that was the idea that we were like, if we have an opportunity because of our growth assessment, that if there's things we've got to add, we have to raise our levy. And especially, again, with the bond, like we are at a point that we're kind of using the fund balance to help pay for, even this year, like a lot of the security upgrades, and it was good. We had a good year, and we used excess money in our budget to address a lot of our facilities items, and we've been able to address some of it. But again, we're losing state funding on that. There's a lot, we're almost like losing dollars by doing that. We need to, like, people understand that this is the way we should be doing things. We need to plan, we have to do bonds, and it looks like a lot of money, but these are things that we're required to do. So I do think that it's important for us to understand that that is an important finance, like to neglect your buildings and just to spend money, and then if God forbid there is a big problem, then we're going to have.
I do want to. But I don't think anyone's.
Do you want to mention something?
Yeah, I don't think any.
You think that? No, I guess I'm kind of piggybacking on what Charlie was saying.
I think we're all saying the same thing.
Yeah, I would agree.
But I thought, what was his name, Tim Downey?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, he said something that I thought was really important. That he said, when times are good. Not saying that we've done this, but when even in your personal life, stock market's up, times are good. You don't think as much about spending, and when there's a recession, you think a little bit more. I think what we should do, because times are good right now, but they might not always be, is when we go into the budget cycle, we should put in our head that we're in a recession, right? We should think that times
We
are
are under the tax cap, which kind of forces us to feel that way. I mean, the fact that we haven't attacked, like, listen, I worked here when the tax, which is whatever, the times he was speaking about when it was like 12% tax rate increases, and that's when everything else would, like, we were paying so little to the retirement systems. I'm like, even thinking, like, what the hell are we spending? But because that's what people, schools were levying those type of things. But I will say that if you look historically from 2009 the downturn is 2007, 2008, there were many years we were negative tax rates here. So if you look like we have really kept, them down. This is the first year since 2008 that we did increase 5.63 on our levy. Prior to that, we were running at 1 to 2%, some years negative. And because we have a self-imposed tax cap, we have to do that. Like this year, we can't. That's why. We may think it's great. We have to stand for 2%, or maybe a lot. Potentially, we're not. I mean, I'd be surprised if we have a growth factor this year. Yeah. So I think because life has changed from the tax caps, I only think in terms of tax caps.
We can only think that way.
I know, but I mean,
he's talking about the wild days of the farmers.
And I was here when they were going up 6, 8, and people would say we have to vote for it because if we don't, the schools are going to go to hell. And I said, I don't think that's true. I actually think this 2% tax cap is the best thing that happened because it forces us. But what if? And I haven't looked at the numbers, but what if we are able to, go down? How much easier does that make it to talk about a bond?
The one thing I will just respond to the tax cap, as much as I would agree, it helped us in some way. A lot of districts, when you're negotiating contracts, some districts use it like, let's run our tax cap. It helps you in those ways, but I can tell you that in other ways it doesn't. We were actually lowering our tax rate when I didn't have a tax cap, but then with the tax cap, you feel you're forced to levy up to the full tax cap. And most districts will not. There's many districts that would not levy 2%, could levy 1%, but will never do that because then you lose the ability to levy it in the future. So in some ways, I would say that most people that I know would agree that there were many years that districts may have, not significantly less, but less. So it is self-imposed, but it doesn't take into account large increase, like enrollment, special education, increases. And I do think, whatever. I mean, I think that if the district was able to just not have more voters keep us accountable, we didn't even need it. I think we were at a point we didn't need it, and then it's too restricted now, in my opinion. But anyway.
So let me just try to summarize where I think we are right now. So obviously the connection between facilities and finance is clear, and I think all these points brought up, Tim's point and everyone here's point, I think we're all kind of on the same page with that, and I do think there's value in us being clear with the public as we continue to educate. And I think maybe as the finance committee thinks about educating the public this year and as part of the facilities and bond, I mean, it's all going to be connected, that we do share some stuff about our philosophical point of view on financial management. I think there's value in that. So 7A, the capital bond discussion, I mean, I think have we kind of had that? Or is there more? Is there more?
No, I think we're good for tonight.
All right.
The only thing we need to talk about is this community forums.
Well, we're not there yet. Yeah, we're not there yet. Minutes. I think, Lisa, you might have some suggestions for 724 and 86. Do you want to?
There were some incomplete.
Do you want to? But do you want to share those with Janine, and then we'll put another one together, and is that cool to wait until the 17th to approve those?
That's fine.
Okay.
Because the drafts are available and the video is available for the public.
So let's do that. So then we're on to committee reports, facilities. I think the big thing that we've discussed a lot on this list already, and the big thing, as Jeremy brought up, was this idea of community forums. So Jeremy, you want to take it away with that? Or anything else you think that we didn't discuss?
I mean, in the facilities committee today, we talked about, do we set up these community forums now, or do we sort of get further down the road and then do them at a later stage? I know, Charlie, you had some feelings about sort of how you've seen it done in the past, or
Well, my experience has always been that the board shapes the bond proposal, and the forums are used as public information so that the voters can decide how to vote. Now, it was mentioned before, it's a different way to do it, I must say, but it was suggested that you have forums to sort of help shape what you want to put in the bond. That's getting a little bit, I don't know, I'm not so sure about that, because at some point the board has to take the initiative, the responsibility to largely shape the bond. Now, if people come in and people have other contrary views, the public will let you know about it. They'll bend your ear in the grocery store, or they'll catch you walking down the street, or they'll come at you, they'll let you know. But you've got to start making decisions sooner than later. I mean, I would say, hey, not tonight. Think about it. Sleep on it. See what your spouse thinks. See what, whatever. Begin to develop an opinion. But you can't, when you come back here 2 weeks from now, not talk about it. You have to, as early as then, if we're going to stick to anything like the timeline she's suggesting, you're going to have to come to a decision or a shape. Hey, what if we took a poll, a straw poll amongst yourself, and you all raised your hand and you said, and you all agree, we agree number one. Well, great, you've got an agreement. Go with it.
Yeah.
Or maybe you find out you're all over the place. Well, that's a different story. Then that means you're going to talk about it more. But I think you got to stick at it. I don't think you're going to have an epiphany.
Are we going to the community?
Oh, this is it.
Are we going to the community forum to sell in an idea? Because I was at the first community forum for the turf grass, and it was 95% people who wanted turf, and then it wound up becoming a huge contentious thing when more people got involved. And the meeting was really to sell in sort of what the three options were, and I don't have any sense of what the community. But it is open to.
That one was a little, in my mind, I agree with you. I mean, I think at that time too, that was a little bit, that scope of work's a little bit different in that I think the board had hoped, because of the field use here, that the turf, we understood the challenges going in with the turf. And I was like, I don't even remember anyone being that positive in me, but maybe there was one that there was a lot of support. But I think it was always like a 50-50. I think to Dr. Wilson's point, this one is a little bit different where the scope of work, I agree, in my experience, the board defines it because you really have the most knowledge about it, and then people do have an opportunity to vote on it. And the board has to feel really comfortable, and that's where amongst yourselves you'll kind of come up with that. I mean, anything you go out with, even if you had a couple community forums, even if you went back out with another bond, I guarantee you would happen the same thing. Maybe some of the people that would show up would inform you, and then you get a bunch of back push from other people. Anyway, so I think the board, first and foremost, I think we have a bunch of things that, even when it was I first looked at it like at Hillside, I'm like, we would never do this, and as time went on and as we discussed it with the administrators, there's more, like now we're starting to look at different things and why it may make sense for us. But to Dr. Wilson's point, I think that the board should really do it, and then create a plan, whatever that plan may be, and then you go out and do the community forums. I think
So let's go back a minute. I think, I'm sorry.
I think at its heart, you've got here an infrastructure bond, $10,000 worth of things that have to be done. Sooner, in my view, the better.
No, 10 million.
What did I say? I'm sorry,
10,000.
I'm sorry. So I think, you can get it, you can go up and you can debate the various things. Do we need the classrooms, or what are we going to do with the middle school? And you can do that, but at the end of the day, it's not so hard, really. It's something you should be able to figure out amongst yourselves.
Yeah,
and then you go out and present it, and you do it in a fashion that you help the voters to understand the advantages to a certain.
Well, and Charlie, what do you think of this as well? It's like, I don't think that in this particular one, it has to be unanimous among the board.
No.
Right? But let's start getting through the process of figuring out where, you need 4 people, right? So start figuring out the process of where do people sit, what are the big questions, and flush that out. If we're 5-2, at least we can go to the public and say we're 5-2 on this, and this is where the 5 are here and the 2 are here, and this is why we're here, and start getting feedback from that. And at 5-2, I'm sure there's no question one of the 5 can go to the, it can wind up being 4-3 the other way.
Are we going with 3 options?
Jeremy, wait a minute. I think the thing that we're leaving out is the facilities committee, not the facilities committee, but the bond, the committee for the bond.
Well, the idea of voting is they've met for a year, and again, I think mixed participation because people, although people confirm dates and then they just aren't able to make it, which is fine. I think at this point, it's the boards moving forward, and we're going to be having these meetings as board meetings, and maybe letting the PTSA liaison, trying to get the word out so people.
But I think it's a facilities committee meeting and moving forward and making some decisions and presenting it to the board to move forward.
Well, I think that's what the facilities committee kind of has. What you saw tonight was an idea of a scope of work, and now I think it's the entire board that needs to make the decisions. There will be some intermediary meetings maybe that are necessary with the facilities committee and the architects that do not take place at a board meeting, as as we, like, let's say as we come to the next one, well, like, how should we present it? Like, how should we present the scope of work to support our programs and kind of get people excited about it? I think right now it was like a pretty plain presentation and do a better job in trying to see what each option would allow for. But I think at this point, it's at the board level, and like Dr. Wilson said, this is something that should be on every board. This is not like, oh, we're going to talk about it again in November. Like, it has to be every board meeting until you define a scope of work. Like, you might have to spend 40 minutes every board meeting. You can't miss a month.
You can't say, well, we won't talk about it, and we'll bring it up in October. Half the fall is gone.
Yeah.
So let's start into decision mode here.
So question on that front. Who do you want questions directed to? Facility committee and you, Maureen, and Charlie CC. Like, if I have specific questions on, hey, what about this, or I was thinking about more about this particular issue in the proposal, where do you want those questions to go?
I would say, I mean, you could put the entire facilities committee, myself and Charlie on it, probably directed to Charlie and myself.
Okay.
And then also, that would be something that could help inform the next, like, presentation of the next board meeting, if you're bringing up a point that then could be, as we move forward.
And you start the next meeting with, we got the following questions, here are the answers.
Yeah.
And you do that every week, you need to do it.
Yeah, and I guess that's the way to do it, is actually CC the whole board on it. So any questions I have, I'll CC the whole board. We just can't let it turn into a full conversation.
But just
information. And I do think as you move forward, as you talk about Hillside, again, I agree. I don't think there's like a tremendous amount of newer students there, but I do think based upon right now the enrollment is probably less than it even was, like Lisa said, when our older sons were in school. But right now, based on program class sizes and offerings, you have a lot more going on than you did. My kids did not have class, like the oldest two.
Did not have what?
Did not have class. We used to have one music teacher. I mean, right now, we have almost 2.6 FTs in music. So there's a lot of things that have changed. I'm not, we're not going to go back over the last 12 years and pinpoint where those changes have happened. But between that, specialists, psychologists, guidance counselors, ENL teachers, like different people that have space at Hillside now, that's just the reality. And I don't think that that's going to change. So I think we'll be better prepared to kind of give a much more comprehensive view of that. But I think that's going to be one that we'll have a lot of discussions around because A, it's very expensive, and B, I think you have a responsibility, though, not to neglect it. Because if, God forbid, we didn't do something and then we continue to have these space issues, what are we going to do? Are we going to start cutting programming and people are going to say, well, you knew we had these? Like, I'm just saying, we need to think about what we need.
Do you want us, just Charlie, you said, well, what if we took a poll right now? Do you want us, when we write to you, to let you guys know where we're meeting, if we have meetings? And then you can
not tonight. I think at the very least, you owe yourself, you want to sleep on it, and you want to talk about it, you want to get... But yes, I think that would be a good question to ask next time you come back, or an interesting one. But I think you need to keep talking about it, considering it. You got to start that dynamic of decision making. You're not going to do it. It's just you're going to come in a few weeks from now and happily decide it. You got to keep working at it.
Can I also ask for a quote, since I see you're going back to Hillside, and I'm hesitant because of enrollment. Could we get a quote on portable classrooms?
Yeah, the only issue with those, Lisa, also, those are required, you still have to go through the whole state process to get approval.
No, but just gives us cost.
Where would they go?
That's what I'm saying, just a price tag.
But where would they? I think that the concern is we don't know where they would go.
I can't answer that at all, but I guess the question is if there is a space. I'm not saying it's the right way to go, but I think it's incumbent on us to at least evaluate everything.
But where would a new addition go?
Well, that you would be putting footings in a building, right? Those are trailers that you would either park in a parking lot or on a back playground. They would have to, or in the field.
I mean, in my own high school, we had them, and they were in the field. They were in the middle. You put your raincoat on, you went out, and we had a good old time.
But I could just imagine that being like,
who gets in it? I don't see that working out, especially with Hillside.
But if we're talking about an $8 million addition versus a $500,000 couple of classrooms, and we're not sure what enrollment is. Again, I'm not saying it's the right way to go, but I think it has to be part of our conversation. And community members have asked that question as well.
But you remember, even I had asked Veronica tonight, there's an option for doing a much smaller addition too, which would be, I would imagine,
without
at least half of that, or
without the cafeteria.
Without the cafeteria. So I think that we need to start investigating that. And again, this was like kind of the pie in the sky. And I'm not trying to push Hillside. The only reason I even bring up Hillside is because in my mind, I'm thinking that the things in this building will more than likely, in my mind, should be included in the bond. Like personally, like those are less debatable, like the middle
It's a
school
much
auditorium.
older building.
Right, and I think those need to be addressed because the middle school auditorium, beyond that it's not being used for anything, it has plaster that is full of asbestos that is just crumbling. So there is health and safety issues that have to be addressed there beyond that. And once you abate, which is going to be about $1 million for that room, you might as well renovate it, right? So I think that that's, in my mind, not even a question. I'm not saying maybe it's a question for people here, but some of those items I think in option 2 are going to, in my mind, more than likely be in our final bond.
Yeah, so I think it's a legitimate question.
Right.
You got to look at that option. On the other hand, prepare yourself, because it's not your father's portable. These things cost a fortune now, and they're equipped with technology and all the rest. So that's what you're in for. But still, it could be a way to save money. And then, but you'd have to ask yourself, well, in terms of what we're saving, but instead of getting bricks and mortar, do you really want to go that route?
And I'm not saying I do want to go that route, but I at least want to know
the options.
Exactly.
But I think with with the option 3 in Hillside, I think there are many more questions that people have about that option. Not just do we need it, but what are the options? What about the parking lot? I mean, I think there are other things that people would have questions and that we would need to hear.
And I know you guys weren't saying it, I don't know if Jeremy remembered it, in that subcommittee, which I do believe was at one point heavily Hillside parents. I can tell you that we had this kind of on it as a throwaway, and that was the one they were the most interested in doing.
With what? With the kitchen?
No, I'm saying, so anytime, depending on what group of parents you get at any given time.
Of course.
They were like, that's no good. Even actually somebody who
that's
had
our
older kids, and she has to do it, and she was like, I would do I think you should do the cafeteria, that's so important. So it is interesting depending on who you get, so I think it is important for the board to feel comfortable with the scope of work. We'll find out all the different options for adding space at Hillside, and then have that, because I think in one way, shape, or form, there may be a need to address some space issues there.
Right, I think we all kind of agree that the Hillside one is the one that we have the most questions about, because that does feel more like a personal preference. Like some of us might feel, Hillside has gone on without a kitchen for how long, and it can still continue that way. So I think that's the one we would have
I think
the most
Hillside
questions
first, and I know this just sounds crazy coming from me, but locker room second. I think as much as I like sports, I go $2.8 million on locker rooms.
Well, it's a Title IX issue, too.
Yeah, that's a legal
issue.
It also becomes a Title IX issue.
With Title IX, is it something that if we're doing a renovation there, that we must bring it up to?
Yeah, I guess.
Are we in violation right now? Because we're old, so
Yeah, I guess I'm going to push on Title. Why was it not a Title IX issue? Like when I was in college, Title IX was passed in '98. We did a bond in '98. It wasn't Title IX.
Once you touch an area, so we were obviously our bathrooms we're talking about they're non-ADA compliant.
Yeah.
Once you engage in working in that area, then you have to bring it up to code.
But if we don't touch locker rooms, then
we can leave them
yeah.
But our demographics in sports are changing, and I think even Jesse had mentioned today, there are more female athletes in the fall sports than there are. So
we'll give the females the men's locker room. Switch it up.
So once we touch that, it has to be.
I got a problem. I got a solution for you.
And we do need to fix the bathrooms down there. So again, we may come up with a revised scope of work, but there are like old showers in both the boys and girls locker rooms that are abandoned, that have not been used, that can be converted into space. We need new bathrooms. They're really in bad shape, but then also there's so much wasted space. So it is a lot.
Yeah, it's just a percentage, and it's like, look, I love it, but if I was, anyway, maybe not at 10:30 at night.
So can I just check in on from a process perspective? Does it make sense? So one of the things I think that's really valuable that's been brought up here is spend time with the documents. People in the facilities committee probably have spent more time with it.
Yeah.
I think it's probably, it's the kind of thing where we could take it and put the documents on our desk and not read through them much and show up at the next meeting with not that much more point of view on stuff and just engage in the conversation one more time. I think what I'm hearing from the group right now is that that's probably not the most productive way to go forward. Engage with the documents, form a point of view, form a perspective, throw some questions out to Maureen, to the facilities committee, and then, Maureen, you'll bring back some answers. If we can answer them right away, we'll answer them right away, but bring back some answers, and to really start doing the work of the board, in public.
I would just say, engage with the documents, not form a point of view. Engage with the documents, see what questions you have, so that you could...
Yeah, but I think to see what questions you have, yeah.
Because I think it's very easy. We all have our points of view of, they didn't have a cafeteria when that's how I feel. But, then I want to know the reason. I want to know what are the compelling reasons that we should consider having a cafeteria instead of just...
Yeah, to me, that's forming the point of view. It's not like I read them 20 minutes ago, okay, I know what I want now.
And just in terms of the documents, Maureen, do you think you could send us, we don't need the deck that she put up there, but the list, the whatever, the must, the maybe, could we just, do you mind saying, and then we can each...
She had those more detailed
The hard copies right there, or presentations right there.
So I printed those for the board, but
Yeah.
I would rather go back. I have her presentation because on some of them, there were some slides, like I think wasn't clear that it did include hard costs, soft costs, so I think in the current form, it could be a little confusing. I'd rather just give it to you.
What's confusing?
Hard and soft.
Right, and then she put the total with hard and soft.
Consistently, some of them included it, some didn't.
Exactly.
Because she
They
ended
said
up
that.
modifying, because I didn't get the...
Maureen, do you want to send to
I'll
the
send it to you
board
guys, yep.
the document we should all work off of?
Exactly.
But I think going back to this formal point of view, I think it's not, don't form just some quick point of view. Take the time to read through, to think through a variety of points of view and perspectives. I like Charlie's idea, let's use the friction of the meetings to get the best ideas out there.
I know it's a great thing, we're having facilities walkthrough this week, so for people, like, as we look at the Hillside, like, just, it is, like, helpful, again, I'm using Hillside because, again, this is the one I think needs the most explanation. I think I have to, like,
asbestos walls.
But I do think as we talked about, when you do any type of work in a building, it opens up so many other opportunities. So as we do our walkthrough, we can kind of just even highlight where things would potentially be, and just get a sense of how realigning, how things even in their current layout don't allow for like certain things to work well. That's all.
There's also, the point, I think, Jeremy, you brought up, some great points, which is engaging the community, and how do we do that smartly? And I'm assuming that there's this kind of, let's just, for an easy term, call it the infrastructure bond, and then there's the kind of more elective programmatic, additions to that, bond, and how some things may fall in between those two. But I'm imagining that there's a world in which we want to present what we feel from both those camps is the right way forward, and at the same time know that we have in our back pocket, if forced, this is what we really think are non-negotiables, right? Which is, I think you have here, is the could-dos and the must-dos, which is, I think, a good, and I still think we should keep that. And Charlie, I don't know if you have a point of view on this, but I think, so my personal point of view is that we should come out with what the board feels, having had some conversations, is that mixture of must-do plus could-do, but know that there's also the must-do fallback position. I don't know what you're...
Yeah, that makes sense. That's logical.
One thing I'm struggling to sort of understand of where people sit is how we want the vote to look. Is it, this is what we decided, and it's a yes/no, or is it, this is the base, this is base plus, and there's like 2 or 3 options? And I think to
We
your
don't have
point
to solve that until we've gone through community forums, though. We'll get some
to
feedback.
Charlie's point, that's sort of what I was saying before, was when do we go to community forums? And to Charlie's point, if you guys have to come up with where you stand, and I'm not sure if you mean like...
It would be better, and you can do this by sending out notices and reminding your community that this issue is being discussed. And we are inviting and encouraging public contribution to the discussion. Many times that I've been involved in these things, what I find out is that it doesn't take long for word to get around town that for X million dollars they're talking about doing something, and that usually brings out a crowd. But you can actually ensure that by virtue of inviting people, reminding people, we're having this conversation, and over the course of the coming months.
So you're saying use the board meetings as the public forum?
Board meetings are the perfect forum. And if people know what you're talking about, they're going to show.
We just have people come all the time.
They will come. And you need, and they will let you know what they're thinking. So we may be thinking here, sitting here thinking, well, X dollars is just too much, then nobody will ever vote for that. But then come to find out, they come out and say, no, we think you should. We heard a gentleman today cautioning us. There was one person in the audience addressing this, cautioning us about cost. Good on him. He's paying attention. But there will be other people who will say, well, what are you feeling about? Go for the whole, enchilada. But you have to hear that. You have to hear those voices, pro and con. You got to engage people that way, I think.
I think it cuts to the heart of this issue we've heard for years now around transparency. And, I think and this isn't, a judgment, but I think that boards in the past, not just this board, any board can get in a position they go, I'm not in the mood for that conversation, and so there's a lot of behind the scenes, 3 people get together, they talk, and they kind of come to an alignment, and then they show up with a baked point of view, and if there's anything I've learned over the last couple of years being on the board is that some of that coming togetherness and friction has to be done in public, and I think that's probably, as something, Charlie, I think that it ends up, while it can be uncomfortable, end up making a better decision as part of the process, which, before I came into this meeting today, I was kind of thinking, and Jeremy, maybe this is where you were, but I was kind of thinking like, we don't form that much of opinion. We have community meetings. We hear from the community. The community's not quite sure where we stand yet on anything, but we're just getting input. But I think we almost need to start forming our own opinions together in public. In the process of them, it just naturally becomes a community forum without having something called a community forum.
Yeah,
right?
So so the September 17th meeting, is that the next one?
That's your next opportunity to talk about this on the calendar.
Are we leading with looking for public comment on the bond, but then we also have the special education update. But are we leading with that in the email and really kind of getting the word out? Or?
Well, special ed clearly has its own place. You want to give that time and attention, but you also want to continue what you started tonight on the bond for sure.
Because I can tell you,
I don't think it's about leading with asking for public comment at the next board meeting.
You said that there's an opportunity to speak about.
Well, we're going to get like further people that always show up, right?
I think honestly, I think I wasn't at all the board meetings over the last decade, but I think that one of the things I heard, and again, this isn't judging the board from the past decade, but one of the things that I heard was, there just wasn't a lot of friction and dialogue at those meetings. It came in, it was pretty aligned, everyone was pretty congenial, that makes sense. And I think that in many ways that creates just a more comfortable meeting in the moment, but it doesn't create what the public actually needs, which is to hear the thoughts and points of view and perspective and us doing the work together in public.
I can say the last bond, there was not consent on the last bond amongst the board members. They did get into kind of heated discussions.
In the meetings, yeah.
Because there were people who were against the reconstruction of Hopper and against the turf on the board. Now, they came to a consensus because they have to put something forward, but there were, I would say, I remember quite a few very tense meetings with the board.
But to your point, and to your question, I think it's incumbent upon us, for the next meeting, to be able to talk amongst us, like looking at this stuff and having questions and asking Maureen questions, and are discussing it, so that we begin to kind of get clarity and we work together. I don't think it would be to first say at our next, we're asking for public comment, because we're not.
I think
people need to hear more from us.
I think you just announced that the board will be having an open discussion on the options available to us in regarding regarding an upcoming bond issuance.
And I would just say I'm not saying people can't do that, but I think a lot of people don't really have enough information yet, and maybe in the course of our talking about it, they'll start to get more information. And we do our FAQ, all those things. Then there'll be a reason to have more. That people will want to come in and have more to say publicly about.
Well, this is, I guess, why, to your point of we have to lay out these various options. Let's say we do that through September 17th meeting. OC 1 meeting, right? So you've got 2 meetings where we're in open discussion, and then there's a community forum within the 2 to 3 weeks after that, but prior to Halloween. Why do the various voting alternatives need to be fleshed out? We're not voting until February.
No, you're not, but there is, legally you have to put out, at one point, what's going to be on the ballot. So that has to be decided upon by like January 1st. So the secret, we can go out with everything, like she said, and then scale it back. But, but what's going on the ballot has to be approved at like a board meeting by January.
But if we have a community, say we have a community forum late October.
But I do think at that point, the board should really have a good sense of what they're putting on the ballot.
100%.
But I think we've already discussed, which I do think makes sense, about, well, first of all, you may just decide as a board that there's no way that you put certain, I'm just saying, possibly not put, say, the hillside, for whatever reason, amongst yourselves, you're like, we're not putting this even forward to the voters, then that would not go on. But at one point or another, you'd all even have to feel comfortable with what's going on the ballot, right?
Yes.
Like, there seems to be some people that seem, in my mind, that they wouldn't even be comfortable putting it on the ballot, even to allow the voters that choice.
There's another issue on timing, it's sort of separate, but to hit this timing, they need to submit the secret by October 1st.
Yeah.
I don't see why we wouldn't just say, put everything on there.
Yeah, that was my question to her today.
It is what she said, there's a cost to doing so.
She said she needs us to tell her what we want on.
Well, we should just put everything on, right?
No, I thought she said earlier that she would put everything on, and then we always have the option to.
Well, that's what she recommended, but I think
you can't add, you can only subtract.
I think she was waiting for us to tell her.
Well, why wouldn't
because the only reason that the districts, because there is a cost to do
right, there is more work to be done for the
and we have to
secret.
pay, right, because they have
Yeah, but the chances that we'll have no secret 1 seemed pretty low because there's because the secret process, unless you're doing just minor renovations, you always hit the secret 1 level, she said. So.
Well, typically, the only thing outside of the addition that would make us hit that level is doing a retaining wall in the parking lot at Hillside. Other than that, we wouldn't hit it. Because even with the fields here, had we not put up certain walls and made certain cuts into the actual landscaping, you can spend a lot of money and not hit it, believe it or not, but because of the fact that the parking lot that we're doing is going to put us in 1, I think you should go to 1 anyway.
Should we decide on that by September 17th?
Yeah, so we can put that in the next meeting or 2, yeah.
Because that's not anything.
What's the cost difference, just so we know?
I think it was like 20 or 30,000, right?
No,
the
secret 1 or secret 2.
I think it was like 20,000
Yeah,
or
she
something
said
like that.
20,000.
They don't get that in starting like.
So you have to do it. I would agree that it makes sense to put it in, because if not, then you're going to lose the ability to do it.
I just don't know that we're going to have
Or
the
it's going to push
time
off the vote.
available to us to save that 20 if we wind up being in a secret 1. But that it's irreversible, you can't go
Maybe
to.
we'll make a final decision on what we tell her for the secret by next board meeting.
Yeah.
That doesn't lock us into anything.
No.
Okay, so I think we could probably go more and more here, but I think we have a general idea. Let me just see if I can summarize what I think we've said here. Everyone's going to just take more look at the documents, start forming some opinions, not a final opinion, but opinions. Reach out to Maureen Facilities Committee with some questions. You guys will bring some answers to those, or maybe have some conversations in the ensuing couple weeks, and then we'll put that on the agenda for next week to discuss more thoughts around forming that bond, what we might want to put forward. And then the only other thing is, I guess, take a look at some of the hillside parking and addition and see if what your gut sense right now tells you that may be included, because if it is, it would force the secret 1. And if so, you have some idea that may be, even if you're not sure, in 3 months you may change your mind, so that we can give some guidance.
The retaining wall is just for the additional spaces?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that we could do, it goes back to Jeremy's point about getting people to turn out and take an interest. We could work with Janine, and I don't know if it should come from you, Doug, or the board as a whole perhaps, but there could be a general invitation, letting the public know that we're in the process of looking at a bond, and We think it's very important for public to have input, and we're looking forward. We hope you'll join us. The next meeting will be September 17th. We anticipate additional meetings, blah, blah, blah. Please come and tell us what you think, or listen, or whatever.
Yeah, we just have to try to make it early in the discussion.
Yeah.
Early in the meeting, so people aren't waiting until 9:30 to get into it. Just we'll get into it pretty early.
Or 10:45.
Yeah, 10:45.
Okay.
That's your bedtime, Bear.
He's off this week.
I'm on vacation, so he stays as late as you guys
I saw
want.
the shorts, didn't you? Okay, so do we feel comfortable moving forward off of this conversation now? Is it good? Okay, all right. So I'm not going to go through too much of the waterfront committee. You can read that. There's not a lot there. I mean, I think it's we have to stay close to that process.
Yeah, there's another one coming up, I guess.
There's another one September 5th. There's another workshop coming up where there'll be more details. So if anyone has some questions on that, our committee report is on board docs. More specifically, the Waterfront Zoning Committee has its own website with all of its minutes on it, which you can go see.
It's great that you're both involved doing that.
Yeah,
I think it's great for us that you're representing.
Yeah, it was about 40 people at that meeting, so it's great. It's confusing. Zoning stuff is highly confusing. So you have a lot of...
timeline of when they think something could actually happen?
Well, timeline when something could happen versus making zoning decisions.
Yeah, I meant like, is there any, I know
Zoning decisions, I don't know.
Zoning
I think in the next 9 to 12 months.
Yeah, I was going to say, zoning decisions are a year away.
Yeah.
Given just the number of parties that need to be heard from to then coalesce to then move forward. So you're just at zoning decisions at that point, so then...
Yeah, it's the biggest the biggest problem is the traffic flow and transportation is going to kill a lot of different development plans. So there's a lot there. I mean, from what I felt, at that meeting, Tim, I think you had to leave by this point, but I shared my sense. It was before I saw this condo stuff come out on the new tax laws. I said, I'm not sure if the town's interests are aligned with the district's interests. And they said that we're totally aligned because we just can't get a serious amount of population down on that waterfront. It's just going to kill the infrastructure. So I think a lot of people are trying to figure out how do we respect property rights, which is, I think, always the big question when you talk about zoning, but at the same time limit the population growth.
Put all the deer there.
Put all the deer there.
Introduce funky animals and see what comes of it.
But you really couldn't put any businesses down there, really.
No, you can't. You can't put many business down there either. So
Senior assisted living, that's really fine.
right.
We have basketball courts.
So okay. I think we're good. So we have a second public comment. I don't know if the public want.
I'm good.
Okay. Any board comments?
Can we applaud him for staying?
Yeah. Well done.
There's a ton of cookies.
Develop an opinion.
Does the board? Anyone on the Board of Ed have further comments on any topics?
At the risk of being shot.
Okay. With that, I adjourn the meeting.